Chapter 41-49. If it wasn't for the Overlord, she's nothing. I can't accept a waste becoming the Palace Lord of Linglong Palace. After Second Judicial Officer said this, she didn't forget to flatter Linglong Palace Lord. The only Palace Lord that I can accept is only you alone. But Linglong Palace Lord apparently wasn't moved by Second Judicial Officer's flattery. On the contrary, a vicious glint flashed past her eyes. It was fleeting. Second Judicial Officer didn't notice it at all. She continued to speak with righteous indignation. I still have the same words. A life for a life, it's only right and proper. Even if the Overlord was here, Yi Qing Luo would have to take responsibility for the few lives she had taken. Following that, Second Judicial Officer raised her chin up high, putting on a look of righteousness, as though she was wholeheartedly thinking for Linglong Palace. Third Judicial Officer immediately went up and pulled Second Judicial Officer back, persuading, Palace Lord naturally has her reasons for making this decision. We just have to do as she says. You're not feeling well now, so don't stay here. If we were to fight, it'd be bad if you're injured. She called out to the female attendants as she lifted Second Judicial Officer's carriage. On the other side, she looked at the surroundings, at those guards who had just rushed over and weren't affected by the Palace Lord's sinister chi, as she shouted in a low voice, still not going over. Take the opportunity to restrain Yi Qing Luo. After she shouted this, she pretended to exhort, if she cooperates, don't harm her life. Third Judicial Officer's words were comprehensive, but it was like a needle piercing into Second Judicial Officer's heart. This was telling her, because Linglong Palace Lord was their Palace Lord, so no matter who the Palace Lord wanted to appoint as the next Palace Lord, they could only listen. Their opinions were all useless. Her body wasn't feeling well. Wasn't it because Linglong Palace Lord took the initiative to injure her? Obviously, Palace Lord didn't trust Yi Qing Luo, but in order to put on a show in front of her, she injured her. Wasn't she innocent? Autocratic, overbearing, and inhumane Palace Lord. A seed was planted in Second Judicial Officer's heart as it sprouted. And on the other side, under the orders of the three judiciaries, the female guards looked at the pale-faced girl who was so weak that she needed the support of the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. Then, he looked at the Palace Master of Dark Palace with fear. Corpses were strewn all over the ground. It was a cruel and bloody scene. They all knew that it was the evil art of the black-robed man. They were also worried that they would be affected by that man and that they would kill each other with their sisters. What are you waiting for? Do you want me to do it myself? Looking at the hundreds of people cowering in fear, Zhang Xian felt a chill run down his spine. The Linglong Palace Master shouted angrily. His face was full of majesty and his aura was suffocating. The moment the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace spoke, all the female guards felt a chill run down their spines, and their bodies trembled. The group of them immediately charged towards Yi Qing Luo like wolves and tigers. Yi Qing Luo, hold on tightly to me, I'll bring you out. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's 5 fingers clasped tightly onto Yi Qing Luo's arm, trying to pull her into his embrace. However, his fingers had just exerted force. Suddenly, an invisible wave of air hit his finger. His 5 fingers instantly felt a numbing pain. He shook for a moment, as his 5 fingers released Yi Qing Luo's wrist. His palm was empty. The person in front of him turned into an afterimage, as it flashed past his eyes. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's face under the black robe had a huge change as he tried to snatch her back. Chapter 41-50. A man dressed in a purple robe descended from the sky. His figure was tall and slender, beautiful and upright. His arms stretched out. In his arms, there was an additional slender red figure. Immediately after, the man emptied one of his hands. His slender fingers were beautiful as he gently waved his sleeves. His sleeves rolled like flowing clouds. A misty, profound glow rippled in all directions. Under everyone's naked eyes, when the profound glow rippled, the speed was obviously extremely slow, but it was just a moment's time. Everyone only felt a burst of domineering and oppressive aura instantly exploded. In an instant, all the surrounding female guards who had swarmed over, along with the corpses on the ground, were swept away. The sky was filled with flying stones, and blood splashed everywhere. The strong aura didn't stop because of this. Everyone only felt a dull pain in their chest. Their internal organs started to rupture and explode. Bam! Linglong Palace Lord's body, which was standing in the midst of flying sand, was suddenly flipped over as she crashed heavily onto a huge rock, which had collapsed not too far away. Her body and mind were in immense pain, which made Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widen. What kind of energy was this? It actually broke through her barrier. Linglong Palace Lord couldn't imagine how she witnessed her own barrier shattering bit by bit in front of her eyes. Ever since she became Linglong Palace Lord, she had never suffered this kind of humiliation. The Overlord, it's Overlord. A few exclamations were like thunder as it fell into Linglong Palace Lord's ears. No, impossible. How could it be Xian? She had obviously set up an inescapable net near Linglong Palace Lord, set up numerous arrays. Even if it was Xian, he would absolutely not be able to barge into Linglong Palace Lord. Linglong Palace Lord forcefully propped up her body as she staggered to stand up and looked towards the direction where the energy came from. Profound waves rippled as the energy pervaded. Yiqing Luo was in the arms of a purple-robed man. That peerless face revealed a kind of soul-stirring charm which no one dared to profane. As he lowered his eyes to carefully size up the young lady in his arms, that pair of shimmering peach blossom eyes blossomed with endless coldness and treachery. A strong aura lingered around him. The moment the Linglong Palace Master's line of sight shifted over, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace Hall looked over. The man suddenly raised his head, and a pair of icy cold eyes shot straight at the Linglong Palace Master. Like a sharp blade, it ruthlessly pierced into the heart of the Linglong Palace Master. The Linglong Palace Lord's pupils suddenly shrank, and he looked away in fear. Following that, his body became extremely stiff. It's him. It really was Xian. The face of the Linglong Palace Master twisted a little. She knew it very well. Xian's appearance would disrupt all her plans, although he had never crossed hands with Xian. However, he just stared at her. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew. This rumored mysterious and powerful overlord, he definitely lived up to his reputation. When everyone saw Xian's appearance, his heart was filled with fear. He felt that death was shrouding his body and mind. However, there was one person who was overjoyed. Xian. The girl's clear and sweet voice was filled with joy. She wrapped her arms around the man's neck and smiled sweetly. The young lady's voice made the man's chilly aura restrain a little. He lowered his head slightly, and his shimmering eyes were tainted with a thin layer of evilness. His eyes were as black as a lake, so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. Yiqing Luo knew that he was angry because of the injury on her body. Chapter 41:51. Over and over again, she softly called out his name. The man finally sighed helplessly. His eyes were filled with pampering. He raised his hand and his palm covered her head. It's no use acting coquettishly. You didn't protect yourself properly, so you deserve to be punished. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand and placed her palms by her lips. She then raised her head and blinked innocently at him. It's my fault. I admit my mistake. I accept my punishment. Verbally, although she admitted her mistake and accepted her punishment. But that expression and that tone. Xian totally didn't hear the meaning of admitting his mistake. But when he met with the young lady's eyes, seeing that she was injured, the irrepressible irritation in his heart gradually subsided. He lifted her chin and his index finger lightly touched her lips as his voice was extremely cold. On the account that you're clean and honest, I'll forgive you. Clean and honest? Yiqing Luo blinked as she had a dazed look. Very quickly, she reacted and turned her head to look at the palace lord of secluded palace. Xian couldn't be talking about him, right? The palace lord of secluded palace who was called out had originally seen Yi Qing Luo's flowery smile towards Dmo Xian, and his heart was stabbed. Suddenly, he heard Dmo Xian's ridiculing and boasting words. His throat couldn't help but had a fishy sweet feeling. He was so angry that he wanted to throw up blood. His heart was filled with bitterness and helplessness. Towards him, Yi Qing Luo always had a cold and distant attitude. Even if he touched her, she would avoid it. But the moment he saw Dmo Xian, he saw with his own eyes that the young lady's face bloomed with joy from the bottom of her heart. The way she looked at Dmo Xian and her body movements, it revealed her love and trust towards Dmo Xian. The more he looked, the more he felt that this scene was extremely glaring. But he had no right to pull the both of them apart. He also didn't have a right to be like Dmo Xian, snatching Yi Qing Luo from his hands without any explanation. When the gazes of the two men shifted onto him, he was stunned. He subconsciously turned his head away, unwilling to look at the loving couple. Yi Qing Luo didn't think so much, and after she heard Dmo Xian's words, she raised her fist and pounded on Dmo Xian's chest. When did you arrive at Linglong Palace? Did they arrive a long time ago? What happened just now? Did you see it clearly? She was referring to the scene where the palace master of the Linglong Palace led his disciples to besiege her. Dmo Xian shook his head and nodded. Then he held her little hand with his broad hand. If I had entered the Linglong Palace, you wouldn't have been injured. There was a tinge of guilt in his voice. His slender fingers lightly touched the Netherworld Phoenix ring on her fingertip. The connection between the Netherworld Phoenix ring and the Netherworld Dragon ring can transmit everything you've experienced to me. Yi Qing Luo's eyes widened as she couldn't help but secretly rejoice that she was an upright person and was extremely clean. Dmo Xian saw through Yi Qing Luo's inner thoughts with one look. He rubbed her head affectionately. When he raised his eyes again, the gentleness and pampering on his face had already faded away. His gaze looked towards the Linglong Palace master who was standing not too far away, attempting to escape. The corners of his lips curled upwards into a bloodthirsty, cold arc bam. He didn't move, but in the air, it was like a sudden clap of thunder as it exploded. The Linglong Palace master had yet to react. Her body was violently blasted away. He could only hear the rumbling of a violent explosion. Following that, her body fell heavily onto the ground once again. Chapter 4152. Mouthfuls of blood spurted out from Linglong Palace Lord's mouth. The ground also started to shake violently. Inch by inch, it started to crack. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace seemed to be fleeing in a panic. He dragged his wretched and low-laughing body as he swayed and rolled on the ground to avoid the crack that had opened up under his body. She used all her strength to prop herself up and climbed up. Every move she made her limbs and bones emitted intense pain. What kind of power was this? She obviously hadn't seen Dmo Xian make a move. Linglong Palace Lord's miserable state fell into the eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples and made them tremble in fear. In their eyes, Linglong Palace Lord was the most powerful person in the world. But the moment the Overlord appeared, he easily suppressed Linglong Palace Lord to the point that she couldn't turn the tables. If the Overlord made a move on them, would they be able to survive? Fear and dread eroded the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples. She's just deliberately mystifying things. Second Judicial Judge's face turned pale. That profound wave earlier made his mouth overflow with blood. But his mouth refused to admit defeat. Her eyes stared deadly at Dmo Xian, and then stared deadly at Yi Qing Luo, as her eyes were filled with venom. Overlord, do you know that the woman whom you've been pining for, pampering, is behind your back, keeping that gigolo by her side? As she said that, she laughed maniacally. This kind of fickle woman, and you're still so protective of her. These 2 days, the both of them are carrying you, sticking together at all times. Even at night, the both of them are in the same room. Do you know why she got hurt? She got hurt because of that pretty boy. Second Judicial Judge's sudden burst of maniacal laughter and the words he said made the surroundings turn silent. Third judicial judge was stunned. He immediately stretched out his hand to pull second judicial judge, attempting to stop second judicial judge from self-destructing. But second judicial judge shook off third judicial judge's hand, his eyes filled with ridicule. Overlord, are you really going to destroy the entire Linglong Palace for such a vixen? I feel indignant for you. Oh, really? The man's gorgeous cold voice rang leisurely. His voice was flat, without the slightest hint of emotion. He got Di-Zun's response. The second judicial officer felt that his words had completely stabbed a man's dignity. After all, Di-Zun was such a high and mighty man. How could he accept such a fickle slut? Even if there was nothing between Yi Qing Luo and the palace lord of secluded Darkness Palace. However, once this rumor was spread out, it would be a disaster. So what if she was innocent? With just a few words, he could still confuse her. How could a woman with a tarnished reputation be worthy of the divine supremacy? Second judge became even more enthusiastic. That's right, Overlord, in my opinion, a slut like Yi Qing Luo should be killed in order to maintain Overlord's prestige. She paused for a moment and suddenly flashed a slightly wretched smile. Overlord, the disciples chosen by the Linglong Palace are all good-looking and have extraordinary backgrounds. If Overlord takes a fancy to any of them, you can take them all away. At least, they will serve you more loyally than that bitch. The second judicial officer's words could be said to be extremely bold. The three judiciaries standing on the side were so frightened that they withdrew their hands. The Linglong Palace Lord also looked at the second judicial officer in astonishment. Chapter 41:53. Towards the second judicial officer's actions. No one tried to stop him, with the second judicial officer diverting the Overlord's line of fire. Why not? What's more, if the second judicial officer's words could really agitate the Overlord to deal with Yi Qing Luo, and among them, who could catch the Overlord's eye? That would be like a sparrow turning into a phoenix, soaring to the skies. Naturally, no one dared to say a word. As for the second judicial officer's fickle woman, vixen, slut, and so on, she only raised her eyebrows with a faint smile, without any other emotions. Her lips curled up slightly. Her long and narrow eyes rose slightly, outlining an extremely shallow cold arc. This was the second judicial officer's motive? To push the female disciple of the Linglong Palace into Di-Mo Xian's arms? Did she feel Di-Mo Xian was so thirsty that he couldn't be choosy? Wasn't the second judicial officer's thinking a little too simple? What are you laughing at? The second judicial officer's gaze stared fiercely at Yi Qing Luo. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's faint smile, filled with ridicule and pity, the anger in his heart surged up. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyebrows as her long and narrow eyes curved even more. She crossed her arms and slowly walked away from Di-Mo Xian's arms. Under the infusion of Di-Mo Xian's profound energy, the internal injury, which was caused by the Linglong Palace Lord, was slowly recovering. That beautiful face that could topple cities also regained its color. When she raised her eyebrows and smiled, the red flame made her even more flirtatious and gorgeous. The second judicial officer was mesmerized by this smile. She's indeed a vixen. The second judicial officer's face flushed red as he angrily tried to conceal his wavering heart because of Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo laughed softly as her eyes squinted, quietly looking at the second judicial officer. Obviously, the distance between the two of them was considered far, and it was parallel to the ground. But the second judicial officer felt that. Yi Qing Luo had a condescending feeling, looking down on her. This kind of feeling made the second judicial officer feel extremely aggrieved. Facing the second judicial officer's increasingly sinister gaze, Yi Qing Luo was still smiling. Her eyes flashed, occasionally with a sharp glint. "I'm laughing at you," the second judge. The girl's clear and melodious voice was filled with ridicule. Her smile seemed to be mocking him. Without waiting for the second judicial judge to speak, the girl raised her eyebrows again. Are you sure you won't take back what you said just now? The second judge snorted disdainfully. Take it back? Why has the second judicial division ever retracted its words? Yi Ching Luo clicked her tongue as she had a helpless look and looked at her pitifully. I forgot to tell you, my Xian is extremely protective of his children. Earlier, those insulting words of yours had infuriated my Xian. She spread her hands and shook her head helplessly. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Since the second preceptor is so unyielding and refuses to take back his words, you'll have to bear the consequences. The last word, Yi Ching Luo, could even raise the final syllable, extremely mischievous and adorable. But at this critical juncture, in the ears of the second judicial officer, it was full of contempt and mockery. Second preceptor's pupils constricted abruptly as his vision swiftly shot towards Ocean. But what he met was a pair of emotionless, as though it was frozen. Just one look, and he felt as if he was in an ice house. His entire body stiffened, unable to move. Chapter 41:54. As the man's voice fell on the last word, bam! A deafening explosion was heard. The crowd only saw. The palanquin of the second judicial magistrate was suddenly torn into pieces. A terrifying and valiant aura instantly exploded. This scene was extremely horrifying. The crowd watched with their own eyes. The second preceptor, who was sitting on the palanquin, was torn into pieces by that terrifying power, as though he had self-exploded. His entire body exploded. Blood and flesh splattered all over. This scene shocked everyone present as they trembled in fear. Even their breathing became cautious. Second judicial officer. Second judicial officer was blown up just like that. Only small pieces of minced meat were left from the explosion. Furthermore, they didn't even see when Ocean made his move. Too terrifying. The rumored Overlord was simply too terrifying. Even a Linglong Palace Lord couldn't do anything to the Overlord. Linglong Palace was finished. This time, Linglong Palace was really finished. Whereas at this moment, that ravishing young lady stood under the minced flesh. Her expression didn't change as she shook her head helplessly. I've said it before, my Xian is protective, but he didn't listen. Look, he lost his life in vain. Everyone was so infuriated by Yi Ching Luo's shameless words that their faces contorted. This man's show-off was really complacent. What's so great about relying on a man? All right, relying on an amazing man was really amazing. At least, it was impossible for them to rely on the Overlord in this lifetime. Yi Ching Luo didn't bother about what those Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were thinking. Her line of sight turned and landed on the Linglong Palace Lord. Looking at the disheveled-looking Linglong Palace Lord who was staring at them vigilantly, Yi Ching Luo's pink lips curled upwards as she walked towards the Linglong Palace Lord, step by step. Her footsteps were very light and slow. Step by step, neither too fast nor too slow. There was no sound at all, but as the young lady lifted her footsteps, the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were pounding furiously. This suffocating atmosphere. The Linglong Palace Master's heart tightened. She glared at the young girl who was walking towards her, her eyes filled with malice. What do you want to do? What do I want to do? Yi Ching Luo tilted her head as she laughed softly. All along, isn't it what you want to do? The face of the palace master of the Linglong Palace was slightly pale. She raised her head slightly and said, I underestimated the strength of a venerable sovereign. I'm not as skilled as you. You can kill me or torture me if you want. His tone was very arrogant. Kill you? Yi Ching Luo shook her finger. Killing you, isn't it freeing you? I'm not that kind. When the Linglong Palace Master heard this, her serious face suddenly changed and her brows wrinkled. What do you mean? Doesn't Lord Hall Master know very well what I mean? Yi Ching Luo had already walked in front of her, merely 3 steps away, if I didn't guess wrongly, to become the Palace Master of Linglong Palace. What you have to sacrifice is your own freedom. She tilted her head again, as though she was in deep thoughts as she smiled. So, how could I let you die? Following her words, every single word was spilled out. The expression on the Ling Long Palace Master's face kept changing. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laugh as her narrow eyes curved. Chapter 4155. Yiqing Luo's eyes were slightly suffused with a faint chill. When her long and narrow eyes were raised, the corner of her eyes outlined a blossoming flame. That smile was breathtakingly beautiful. But in the eyes of the Ling Long Palace Master, he looked like an Azura who had crawled out of hell. Every single smile and frown revealed a chill that caused one's entire body to go cold. The Ling Long Palace Lord had never encountered such a pressing pressure before. Even earlier, when he met DMO Xian's icy sharp black eyes, he did not have such a feeling. Fear unconsciously seeped out of her eyes. When he spoke, even his voice trembled slightly. "What do you want to do?" Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as she looked at her disdainfully. "What do you think I want to do?" The Ling Long Palace Master pursed her lips, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She did not answer. He clenched his fists tightly. He felt humiliated. Yiqing Luo intentionally paused for a moment, admiring the Ling Long Palace Lord's icy cold face, revealing such an embarrassed expression. She said nothing. Invisibly, it created even more pressure on the Palace Master of the Ling Long Palace. The pupils of the Ling Long Palace's Hall Master rapidly contracted. It was as if a hurricane was about to burst out of her eyes. Yiqing Luo then parted her lips slightly and said word by word, "What is the purpose of Ling Long Palace's existence? You, and the so-called mysterious fairy, why do you exist?" Because her body was suitable, she was forced to become the next Palace Master of the Ling Long Palace. It sounded extremely ridiculous. In the Ling Long Palace, he needed to find a compatible body. There must be some sort of motive or reason behind this. Hearing Yiqing Luo's question, Ling Long Palace Lord's expression froze for a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about. Since you want to die so badly, you might as well tell me about it. If I'm happy, I can fulfill your wish, right?" Yiqing Luo opened her mouth with a smile as her slender fingers gently caressed her lips. He looked as if he was really helping the Ling Long Palace Master out of kindness. The muscles on the face of the Ling Long Palace Lord trembled slightly. What did he mean by letting her get what she wanted? If they could, who would want to die? If he really wanted to die, how could he have endured in the Ling Long Palace for so many years? Even though he was the Ling Long Palace Lord, he did not have any freedom, and he could not seek death. However, if a person really wanted to die, there were thousands of ways to do so. Moreover, the Ling Long Palace Lord would want her to inherit the position of the next Ling Long Palace Lord in exchange for her freedom. This meant that she did not want to die at all. For a person who longed for freedom, but did not dare to, and was unwilling to die, the only way was to follow her psychological line of defense and infiltrate bit by bit. "What do you think? Has Hall Master considered it?" Yiqing Luo asked with a beaming smile. That Lord Hall Master was filled with mockery. The Ling Long Palace Lord's fists were tightly clenched, and her 5 fingers were tightly interlocked together. A pair of venomous eyes seemed to be filled with ice. Her entire body tensed up, as if squeezing each word out from the gaps of her teeth. She said through gritted teeth, "What do you want to know?" Yiqing Luo's smile deepened as she lowered her body slightly. That gorgeous face was magnified in the Ling Long Palace Lord's pupils. She smiled sweetly. "The reason for the existence of the Ling Long Palace and the standard of the body that you have your eyes on." Chapter 4156. The Ling Long Palace Master did not respond. With a sunken face, he exchanged glances with Yiqing Luo. The storm in his eyes seemed like it was about to explode. "Don't want to say it?" Yiqing Luo raised her eyebrows and dragged out the last syllable. "Huh. Miss Yi." At that moment, the voice of the great judge was heard. Everyone's attention was drawn to her. The great judge took a careful look at DMO Xian before opening his mouth to speak. "Miss Yi, isn't the purpose of Ling Long Palace's existence to maintain the balance of the Earth realm? If Miss Yi is unwilling to become the Ling Long Palace Master, we won't force you." "No!" A furious roar suddenly rang out. Ling Long Palace Lord's eyes were burning as he stared at Yiqing Luo. "It must be her. Why? The great judicial magistrate pursed his lips tightly. He really couldn't understand why the hall master insisted on making Yi Ching-chang the next hall master, especially in front of his majesty. This was no different from courting death. What was the palace master persevering for? It wasn't just the Grand Inquisitor's doubts. This was also the doubt in the hearts of many disciples of the Linglong Palace. Yi, Lady Yi, the Grand Judicial Magistrate's face turned pale as he looked at Yi Qing Luo, racking his brains to think of a way to help the Linglong Palace Lord escape. This was not because she valued the Linglong Palace Lord. Instead, the moment something happens to the Linglong Palace Master, everyone they interact with will be blamed. The Overlord would definitely be furious for the sake of the beauty. Yi Qing Luo didn't even cast a glance at the Grand Magistrate. The smile on his lips had yet to dissipate. On the contrary, it added a treacherous arc. However, amidst the treachery, her smile became extremely sweet. What if it has to be me? It seems that Lord Palace Master does not intend to have a proper discussion with me. The storm gathering in the eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord had already turned extremely dark. It was as if he had been forced into a corner. His 5 fingers tightened. His figure was swift as he broke through the raging waves around him. Bringing along the piercingly cold, profound wave, he approached Yi Qing Luo in an aggressive manner. This action of the Linglong Palace Master was filled with the determination to die. She did not give herself any leeway at all. It was beyond everyone's expectations. After all, Dizun was just there, fighting in front of Dizun. Was he tired of living? But it happened. The Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace did exactly that. Not only that, she had succeeded. In front of the Overlord, he had successfully pushed his palm towards Yi Qing Luo. That palm strike was completely different from the Linglong Palace Master's strength. Instead, it was a kind of terrifying power that was close to destroying the heavens and extinguishing the earth. Yi Qing Luo's eyes sunk. He blinked his eyes in a certain direction. He quickly flipped over. Perhaps the blink of an eye had delayed him for a moment. Her figure seemed to have been sent flying by the majestic aura. The slender figure spun a few rounds in the air. Under everyone's gaze, 2 figures flew up at the same time, following the direction of the young girl. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and his style was peerless. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and his evil aura was awe-inspiring. But the 2 of them moved at the same time, but they were not as fast as the Linglong Palace Master. Just as the 2 of them flew up at the same time, the young girl's body fell into the hands of the Linglong Palace's Palace Master. The surroundings were filled with piercingly cold glints. The murderous aura charged towards the entire space. Yi Qing Luo's shoulder was tightly gripped by 5 icy cold fingers. Chapter 41:57. Linglong Palace Lord didn't stop at all. She didn't even bother to look at Dmo Xian and the Palace Lord who had already rushed over. Violent energy vibrated in the air. Profound ripples surged, blocking the path of the 2. When she raised her eyes again, Linglong Palace Lord and the young lady's figures had completely disappeared from everyone's eyes. Yi Qing Luo, Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he turned his head and stared at Dmo Xian. An Overlord, you can't even protect your own woman? Dmo Xian's gaze didn't even look at him as his deep as ink eyes stared unblinkingly at the direction where Linglong Palace Lord and Yi Qing Luo had disappeared. There was no response. The anxious Palace Lord's eyes were covered with a layer of cold intent. Dmo Xian. He had just finished his shout. A purple afterimage flashed past her eyes. Dmo Xian's figure had already disappeared. Beside her ear, there was a man's icy cold voice which was blown by the wind into Palace Lord's ears. You also know that she is this Lord's woman? The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace froze on the spot. Yi Qing Luo only felt a wave of light surging in front of her. The howling cold wind was like a bone scraping, fiercely blowing against her face. Everything in front of her was covered by a patch of black. She could only faintly see that surging silvery light not far ahead. As she got nearer to the direction of the surging, that hand on her shoulder was clasping harder and harder. Linglong Palace Lord seemed as though she wanted to crush her bones completely. The distance between the two of them was separated by a robe. Yiqing Luo could clearly feel the nervousness from Linglong Palace Lord, as well as the fear that arose from the bottom of her heart. Yes, fear. Yiqing Luo's lips unconsciously lifted. But moments later, Linglong Palace Lord had already brought her to their destination. What entered her eyes was a patch of empty, beautiful pitch black. The most eye-catching thing was that in that pitch black, there was an obvious shape of a huge black hole. That black hole was in the shape of a vortex. As though it was in the darkness, a huge, bloody mouth was opened. It was as if it wanted to devour everything in the world. He just stared at the huge black hole. Yiqing Luo felt a strong sense of discomfort. It was as if some sort of heavy energy was constantly seeping out of the black hole, suppressing the surrounding space. No, I don't know if it's an illusion. He had a feeling that this black hole was about to burst out and suppress everything in the world. Yiqing Luo's mind had just flashed past this thought. All of a sudden, the palace master of the Linglong Palace gave her a forceful push and retreated to the front of the gigantic black hole. Yiqing Luo staggered a little and finally stabilized her footsteps. However, the Linglong Palace's palace master closed in on her again and pushed her into the black hole. As she neared the black hole, Yiqing Luo felt a chill down her spine. Something cold pressed against her face. That touch sticky and cold. It was so cold that it made one's hair stand on end. It was even more horrifying than having a poisonous snake crawling on his face. Yiqing Luo's brows twitched. He subconsciously wanted to reach out and grab the thing on his face. But in the next instant, that cold and sticky thing stuck to her hands again. Both her hands were tightly confined, totally unable to move. That disgusting feeling made Yiqing Luo's goosebumps all over. Chapter 4158. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes, trying to adapt to the scene in front of her. But no matter how she looked around, the surroundings were still in darkness. She felt as if she was trapped in a boundless black fog. She couldn't see her fingers in front of her. Even the night vision eyes that he usually used were useless. At this moment, it had no effect at all. What on earth was going on? Just as she was pondering over it, her forelimbs had been entangled with a sticky cold thing. It completely confined her, making her unable to move. Suddenly, Linglong Palace Lord's trembling voice was heard. "My lord, this is the next successor of Linglong Palace, Lord whom you have set your eyes on." Linglong Palace Lord's tone was filled with fear and cautiousness. "My lord?" Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes. So, the thing in this black hole was the person whom Linglong Palace Lord was loyal to? Could it be this sticky, cold thing that was entangled on her body? Was it created by that, my lord? Yiqing Luo's emotions were in a whirl. But on her face, there was no change in her emotions. She was just about to find out what was hidden in this pitch-black surroundings. Suddenly, an ice-cold feeling, as if it was glued to her body, caused her to have goosebumps, and a voice that made her hair stand on end rang in her ears. "Well done." It was just 4 words, but it made Yiqing Luo's heart lifted. This voice, it seemed to be beside her ears, but if she listened carefully, it seemed to be in a faraway direction. The tremors continued to reverberate in his ears. Not only was she unable to differentiate the other party's location, even the sound was unable to differentiate the direction. Danger! Outside the black hole, Linglong Palace Lord's voice rang once again. "My lord, I have already found someone to replace me. My lord had once promised me." Speaking to this point, Linglong Palace Lord's voice quivered, as though she was trembling, as though she was in fear. But after the quivering, as though it was for her own future, she mustered up her courage and continued. "My lord had once promised me to return me my freedom." Slave? The person behind Linglong Palace Lord actually called himself a slave? To the person hiding in the black hole, Linglong Palace, was it just a slave farm of Tie? Of course, I won't go back on my word. That cold and sticky voice sounded emotionlessly. This made the Linglong Palace master kneel on the ground in excitement. "My lord is wise." As soon as the Linglong Palace Lord's voice fell, suddenly, a blood-curdling scream was heard. Immediately following that, Yiqing Luo's eyes suddenly lit up with silver light. The light was faint, but under this boundless darkness, there was no end in sight. At this moment, Yiqing Luo saw clearly the scene in front of her under the boundless black sky. In all directions, there were strands and strands that looked like a net made of blood and bones. It was like a dense spider web. The blood bones were still dripping with sticky blood. But what shocked Yiqing Luo the most was not far ahead. There was a human figure in the bloody bones. As the silver light moved, the person's face was clearly illuminated. It was the palace master of the Linglong Palace. She was entwined in the bloody bones, as though she was firmly attached to the bloody bones. It was exceptionally disgusting and horrifying. Linglong Palace Lord was still screaming miserably, heart-wrenching. Chapter 41:59. That sticky, icy, cold voice laughed sinisterly. Since when did this god lie to you? You want freedom. Death. Isn't that the biggest freedom? No. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widened in terror, trying to struggle. But how could she break free from the densely packed, bloody bones that were imprisoning her all over her body? The more she struggled, the more the blood bones embedded into her body, as though her entire being was sucked into her blood bones. Linglong Palace Lord's expression, in the midst of her struggle, gradually became extremely twisted and horrifying. She even bared her fangs and brandished her claws towards Yiqing Luo, hoping that Yiqing Luo could save her. In front of this god, you still dare to call yourself I? Have you forgotten the rules which this god had set for you? The icy cold voice was mixed with anger. You deserve to be punished. These two words had just ended. Yiqing Luo heard Linglong Palace Lord's heart-wrenching scream. Following that, a faint silvery light enveloped her. Yiqing Luo saw Linglong Palace Lord's body was slowly absorbed by the blood bones. Until the very end, that face which was filled with fear, pain, malevolence, distorted. Various expressions was also sucked into the blood bones. Yiqing Luo totally didn't see clearly. How did that blood bones sucked such a huge person like Linglong Palace Lord into a blood bone, which was only as thick as an arm? She only knew Linglong Palace Lord slowly became smaller in front of her eyes, and finally turned into nothingness. But Linglong Palace Lord's agonizing screams continued to ring beside her ears. The instant when Linglong Palace Lord disappeared, the silver light in the surroundings also suddenly dissipated. In front of her eyes, it turned into a patch of pitch darkness where she couldn't even see her own fingers in front of her. The densely packed blood bones which spread across the entire space also disappeared into the darkness. But that scene had already been firmly engraved in Yiqing Luo's mind. Following the descent of darkness, Yiqing Luo's heart thumped hard. The scene of Linglong Palace Lord being swallowed earlier kept replaying in her mind. Now, the thing which stuck onto her body, the thing which confined her, was that blood bone which saw earlier. That blood bone was something which sucked human flesh and blood. So, she was now imprisoned by the blood bone. In other words, he would become food for Shuigu? No, that's not right. This thought flashed past Yiqing Luo's mind, but it was instantly denied. If he was not wrong, the reason for the existence of the Linglong Palace should be because of the lord that the Linglong Palace Master mentioned. Lao Lai and the Palace Master of the Dark Palace had also mentioned it. The Linglong Palace was a place to find a body that was compatible with the body. The so-called Empyrean fairy was just a puppet that he had raised. Yiqing Luo's eyes immediately sunk. It looked like the Linglong Palace Master had taken a liking to her and wanted her to become the next palace master. It should be the owner of the blood bone, which was also the meaning of the lord that the Linglong Palace Master had mentioned. The owner of the blood bone had taken a fancy to her body. Therefore, it would not easily devour her. Little girl, this god knows. You saw it. Suddenly, a cold voice drifted into his ears. It was as if the voice beside his ears was sticky and slippery. It made one's hair stand on end. Don't worry. As long as you listen obediently, this god will not do anything to you. That voice sounded like a weird uncle who was pinching his throat and coaxing a child. It was extremely ear-piercing. Chapter 4160. Before saying the word rest assured, could he take back the blood and bones around her before saying those two words? Was there any credibility? Before you appeared, that slave, wasn't she living well? Seemingly sensing Yi Qing Luo's distrust, the gloomy voice spoke again. So to say, as long as someone appears to replace me, I will be the next one? Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but laugh when she heard that. The owner of this bloodbone was really interesting. In front of her, he sucked the Linglong Palace Lord dry. And now he even used the Linglong Palace Lord as an example. Was this a threat or a threat? Based on your aptitude, in a short period of time, there is no one who can replace you. That gloomy voice laughed coldly. Yi Qing Luo's lips twitched as she was filled with ridicule. Then in the end, I will still be replaced, isn't it? If you don't want to be replaced, then work hard to become a good slave. The gloomy voice sounded as though it was a matter of course. Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes slightly as she slowly relaxed her body and emotions as she replied, I have never been a slave before. If there isn't any benefit that is enough to attract me, then I will be very unwilling. That's right. That voice spoke confidently. You have the honor to become this god's slave. Is this not enough to attract you? Become the Linglong Palace Lord, and the entire Linglong Palace will be yours. I really can't attract you. I don't even know who you are. Yi Qing Luo replied indifferently. I don't have much interest in the Linglong Palace. Her tone was obviously filled with a sense of probing, not knowing if that person didn't hear it or was too confident of himself. But his reply was very straightforward. This god is the God Realm's supreme god. God Realm? Supreme god? What the hell? Yi Qing Luo expressed a dazed look, with a blank look. Yi Qing Luo's reaction obviously didn't satisfy the owner of the Bloodbone's pride, as the other party's tone suddenly became heavier. God Realm. This god is the God Realm's supreme god. Yi Qing Luo's eyelashes fluttered as an undetectable cold arc flashed past her eyes. This small reaction made Yi Qing Luo easily guess the other party's character. It was obvious that he had always been proud of his family status. In his eyes, he was the god who ruled over all things in the world, and everyone else was just slaves and trash in his eyes. There wasn't much change on Yi Qing Luo's face as she pretended to be puzzled. Divine Realm. You mean the divine realm of the upper realm? Are there really gods in the God Realm? How could a god appear in the land and hide behind the Linglong Palace? After asking a few questions, Yi Qing Luo seemed as though she couldn't even convince herself as she clicked her tongue. I don't believe you. As expected, the blood bones wrapped around his body tightened their grip. It was the feeling of forcibly stabbing into her flesh. The blood bone was sharp, as if it wanted to fuse with her flesh. A lowly slave like you dares to question this god's words. The cold and sticky voice suddenly became cold and treacherous. Yi Qing Luo was in so much pain that her entire body felt like it was being dismembered and her forehead was oozing with cold sweat. Why can't I doubt you? If what you said is true, how could you have such a big reaction? Chapter 4161. The God Realm naturally has a god. Otherwise, why would it be called the God Realm? The gloomy and sticky voice sneered. This god is the supreme god that everyone in the God Realm revered. Isn't it your honor that this god has taken a fancy to you? In the future, if you can live to the extent that this god can't bear to kill you, this god can bring you back to the God Realm and let you step onto the altar. That tone was filled with arrogance and complacency. The tone was filled with charity. Yi Qing Luo still had no expression on her face. She was secretly calculating that person's words. She could tell. That person's arrogance came from his bones. It didn't seem like he was lying. God Realm. Supreme God? This was indeed an irresistible temptation of the EMO. After all, which cultivator in the world didn't want to step into the God Realm? Didn't want to become a god? The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and there was a faint flash of light in her eyes. This light didn't avoid the owner of the blood bones. That person thought that Yiqing Luo was moved and continued in a gloomy and cold voice. As for why this god is in the earth realm, this point, as long as you are willing to be my slave, you will naturally know. The words had reached this point. Yiqing Luo also knew that there was no way to find out more information from that person's mouth. Currently, she could confirm a few points. The other party came from the god realm, and his status was noble, the supreme god of the god realm. The reason why he was in the earth realm was unknown, but the only thing she could be sure of was that the other party needed a powerful cultivator or a special human's flesh and blood to maintain his power. Or, like the former king of darkness, he needed to break the seal. Densely packed blood bones, and it could directly suck people and swallow them. When it sucked people, the surroundings emitted a faint silver light. It was a little strange. If she wanted to confirm what the supreme god of the god realm needed, the reason why it was compatible with a certain power body, only by finding the similarities between the three mysterious fairies and the previous mysterious fairies. Young lady, this god is not asking for your opinion. You are the body that this god has taken a fancy to. You can't escape. The gloomy and cold voice was like a venomous snake. Even the blood bones that were embedded into the flesh became more entangled. When the blood bone fused with her flesh and blood, Yiqing Luo felt that there was something in her body which was swiftly draining away. Yiqing Luo's eyes turned cold. All the dark force in his body burst forth. The thick and vigorous energy swept through the surrounding air, stirring up fiercely. Although she couldn't break free from the man's grip, she was still able to resist. However, it also made the bloodbone loosen its grip a little. The feeling of something being drained from his body also disappeared in an instant. Yiqing Luo's complexion was slightly pale, and her pupils were extremely sharp. "Little girl, you want to resist me?" The sticky voice was mixed with a hoarse sneer, like a sharp saw that was rubbing against each other. If it weren't for the worry of breaking your new slave, this god would really like to see how far you can resist. His tone was filled with excitement and madness. Yiqing Luo's fingers clenched tightly. The profound phoenix ring on his fingertip left a deep mark on his skin. Suddenly, the profound phoenix ring heated up. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up, and the expression on her face also became gentle. Slave, obediently inherit the Ling Long Palace and become the lord of the Ling Long Palace. As for the follow-up mission, this god will issue it to you. The gloomy voice didn't seem to sense the change in Yiqing Luo's emotions. Chapter 4162. After finishing this sentence, Yiqing Luo then felt the blood bone wrapping around her body, pushing her bit by bit towards a certain direction. In the darkness, Yiqing Luo couldn't see the direction she was being pushed towards, but she could roughly guess. The other party was trying to push her away from this black hole. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed slightly. If she left this black hole now, everything he had done just now would be for naught. Yiqing Luo's fingertips clenched tightly. He could feel the profound phoenix ring embedded in his finger. Her lips curled as her voice suddenly became ridiculing and disdainful. "Senior, aren't you a little too impatient? I've never agreed to be your slave." That pushing force suddenly paused, as the gloomy, cold voice became hurried and ruthless. "Young lady, you don't have the right to choose. Everything you've said is merely your side of the story." Yiqing Luo sneered. "You don't even dare to show your real face, and only know how to hide like a dark rat. If I let you be my slave, I would despise you for being a coward." Her words were filled with ridicule. "How dare you be so rude in front of this god?" That gloomy and sticky voice suddenly exploded with rage, as though it couldn't control its own emotions. That originally loose blood bone once again gathered together. Beside her ear was the cold and ruthless voice of the master of the blood bone. "Do you really think this god can't bear to kill you?" Perhaps the other party had never experienced such a situation before, and had never suffered such disrespectful treatment. That voice sounded even more gloomy and cold when the blood bone was deeply embedded. Yiqing Luo felt that the blood bone was like a huge suction cup, sucking on her body. That feeling of something being drained from her body struck her once again. What this god is interested in is merely this body which can bear this god's power after obtaining your body. Whether you live or die is not important. The master of the Bloodbone laughed cruelly. This god doesn't have to have you. Don't think too highly of yourself. Yiqing Luo had a feeling of being placed in an ice cellar. Her forelimbs were entangled with no way to struggle. She could only allow the coldness to corrode her body and mind. And that feeling of something being drained continuously. She took a deep breath and suppressed the pain. Word by word, he spat out from between his slightly pale teeth. If you want my body, you can try. The provocative words enraged the owner of the Bloodbone. The powerful dark light quickly filled the entire space. Intertwining with those sharp blood bones made Yiqing Luo feel even more pain. Just then, suddenly, an extremely faint stream of light appeared in the air. Immediately after, Yiqing Luo felt a gush of warmth enveloping her. The sensation that was tightly attached to her body also left her body. What replaced it was a thick and warm chest. The man's clear and melodious voice, like the babbling of flowing water, faintly sounded. Body? Who? Who is it? That cold voice roared. All around, one could hear the rustling sound of the densely packed bloody bones scurrying about, although Yiqing Luo couldn't see who it was. However, the elegant scent of sandalwood made her feel at ease. He instantly recognized the man who had rushed over. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a smile. From feeling the aura from the profound phoenix ring, Yiqing Luo knew that her Xian had arrived. Yes. Chapter 4163. At that moment, Yiqing Luo specially took a look at DMO Xian. It was to pass on her own plan. Only when she was brought away by the Ling Long Palace Lord would she be able to find out the real motive of the Ling Long Palace Lord and from there lead out the mastermind. As long as she knew who the mastermind was, everything would be much easier to settle, as long as there were no accidents. The profound Phoenix Ring and profound Dragon Ring's connection could totally allow DMO Xian to follow the aura to find her. Just one gaze had explained so many things. Luckily, she and DMO Xian had a tacit understanding. DMO Xian hugged the young lady's slender body tightly as his chilly peach blossom eyes swept across the boundless darkness. His gaze turned colder by several degrees. With a wave of his sleeves, a strong wind blew out. Profound energy pervaded every corner of the surroundings. Yiqing Luo suddenly felt her eyes lighting up. She immediately raised her little head from DMO Xian's embrace. She saw the man's floating profound energy spreading out, and wherever it went, it blew away pieces of pitch black like ink, just like sunlight, chasing away all the darkness. The surrounding scenery became clearer bit by bit. The space under the illumination was not like the faint glow which was emitted when the blood bones swallowed the Ling Long Palace Lord. Yiqing Luo could see the horrifying scene around her even more clearly. The blood bones, which were dripping with blood, were like a spider web spreading across the entire space. Other than the position where DMO Xian was hugging her, the surrounding 2 steps radius, the rest of the space, were all covered. And what made Yiqing Luo most shocked was, in the middle of the sky, full of blood bones, hung a head. A man's head. His age was around 40 or so, with handsome features. She could tell that he was a handsome man when he was young. That head's eyes stared straight at their direction. Who are you? How dare you trespass into this god's territory? That head's mouth opened and closed. That voice was exactly the same as the icy cold and sticky feeling which Yiqing Luo heard earlier. It's him. This head was the owner of the blood bones, the mastermind behind Ling Long Palace. Why would he have such an image? As though sensing Yiqing Luo's gaze, that head looked towards her with a sinister look. Young lady, it's you. These are the reinforcements you've brought. His tone was full of ridicule. Naive. I am a supreme god of the divine world. How dare you, a bunch of ants, try to contend against me? The head's voice fell. The blood bones from all directions quickly gathered towards the two of them. But before he could get within 2 steps of the two of them, the densely packed bloody bones seemed to be blocked by something, and all of them piled up in the air. One bloody bone after another, one after another. They surrounded the two of them, almost forming a wall. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but shiver, although the blood bones couldn't get close to her. But seeing so many bloody bones piled up in front of him, just the thought of it gave him goosebumps. DMO, Xin, naturally felt the slight tremble of the person in his arms. His eyes darkened. He opened his palm and gently stroked the girl's slender back. The thick palm and the scorching temperature soothed the discomfort in the girl's heart. The sleeve of his other hand fluttered. Ka, cha, rumble. A vast aura suddenly exploded. The majestic, profound energy rushed against the blood bones. Chapter 4164. Ew, who exactly are you? The expression on the head's face was twisted to the point where it couldn't be any more twisted. It was hideous and terrifying. There was a hint of disbelief in his cold eyes. The man in front of him was dressed in a purple robe like flowing clouds, unparalleled and peerless. That pair of inky black eyes were pitch black. His gaze was calm, without any extra emotions. But just one look and a feeling of fear and awe arose from the bottom of his heart. Awe. When had he ever had such a feeling? He was the high and mighty god of the god realm. How could he be in awe of anyone? But he was very clear. This man, just a casual lift of his hand, and he was able to completely break his indestructible blood bones. His strength was absolutely not weak. Who was this man? Bloodbone barbaric king? The man opened his thin lips slightly and spat out these 4 words, which made the expression on the head completely stiffen. The head's shocked and incredulous expression had been replaced by a gloomy ruthlessness. His eyes were covered with a layer of frost. The ice-sealed sharp gaze seemed to turn into a sharp blade and cut the opponent's heart. Who are you? Why do you know this god's name? His sticky voice was even colder. DMO Xian replied indifferently. I once heard that the blood-bone barbaric king privately used the divine body as nourishment to extend his life and enhance his own strength. This caused chaos in the god realm. The emperor of the god emperor sent an army to suppress it, but they became nourishment for the blood-bone barbaric king and were completely annihilated. Following DMO Xian's words, that head's expression became more and more gloomy. In the end, his entire head hung low. His long hair hung loosely at the side of his body, concealing his emotions. But it could be seen, because of DMO Xian's words, he recalled the past that had long been buried in the deepest part of his heart, unwilling to dig out. But suddenly, DMO Xian took another turn. After the army was annihilated, the emperor of the god emperor personally went into battle and annihilated you. Annihilated? That meant he didn't even have the chance to reincarnate. Yiqing Luo was puzzled. If the blood-bone barbaric king was really annihilated, how could he possibly appear in the earth realm? Could it be that the divine emperor did not really kill the blood-bone barbarian king? And after the divine emperor passed away, the blood-bone barbarian king quietly escaped? No, this isn't right. How could the divine emperor make such a mistake if he personally took action? The divine emperor would have personally confirmed that the blood-bone barbarian king had been annihilated. Under the eyes of the divine emperor, the blood-bone barbarian king had no choice but to secretly do something like this. I didn't expect that after tens of thousands of years, someone would still remember me. That head, no, it should be called the barbaric blood-bone king now. He laughed sinisterly, his face filled with ridicule. You are someone from the god realm? No. DMO Xian glanced at him indifferently. Barbaric blood-bone king, you built the Linglong Palace in the earth realm and controlled the entire earth realm. Your motive is to reappear in the world, right? Ha, ha. The barbaric blood-bone king laughed loudly, but in his laughter there was a chilling intent. Reappear in the world? This god's biggest motive is, this god wants to attack back into the god realm and let that bastard have a taste of all the pain this god had suffered. Attack back into the God realm. Chapter 4165. Was the barbaric Blood King sure that he was not joking? God realm. That was the God realm. Was it something that could be attacked, as one wished? Could it be that he had stayed in the dark for too long, and his brain had rusted? You want to seek revenge from the sovereign of God emperors. DMO Xian could hear the hatred in the barbaric Blood King's words. The barbaric Blood King sneered as his blood bones started to make a cracking sound. Yes, this god wants to trample that bastard under my feet. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes slightly. The barbaric Blood King's reaction was obviously too intense. This kind of hatred was not only because he had been defeated by the sovereign of God emperors. It looked like the former sovereign of God emperors and the barbaric Blood King must have had a past. Before Yiqing Luo could imagine a big piece of melodramatic story in her mind, the man's low and indifferent voice came into her ears. Perhaps your expectations are going to be disappointed. The barbaric Blood King's expression suddenly sunk. What do you mean? The sovereign of God emperors had already passed away not long after you turned into ashes. DMO Xian said. As soon as these words left his mouth, the expression on the face of the head embedded in the bloody bone seemed to freeze. After a few breaths of time, he suddenly looked at DMO Xian. His eyes were filled with anxiety and disbelief. How could she? How could she? The long hair on the head was also swaying because of the agitation. The densely packed skeletons in the surroundings continuously let out intense cracking sounds. You are lying to this god. She is the sovereign of God emperors and has the ability to live forever. How could she have passed away? DMO Xian's expression was still indifferent. No one knows what happened 10,000 years ago, but the sovereign of God emperors has passed away. It is indeed a fact. The barbaric Blood King's eyes froze bit by bit and finally fixed on an expression. His mood looked a little dejected, with an indescribable feeling. The entire space fell into silence once again. The barbaric Blood King did not say a word for a long time. Yiqing Luo was secretly thinking of a big wave of melodramatic plot. Suddenly, she was knocked by DMO Xian. Yiqing Luo felt the pain and raised her head to glare at the man. However, she was met with the man's dark and serious gaze. Don't let your imagination run wild. The Emperor of the Divine Emperor has nothing to do with the barbaric Bloodbone King. Yiqing Luo's grumbling words were swallowed by the man's seriousness. She puffed up her cheeks, not understanding why DMO Xian had suddenly turned so serious. Could it be because of the Divine Emperor? It could be seen that DMO Xian had deep feelings for the Emperor of God Emperors. Kind of like respect. It was kind of like reverence. His feelings were complicated, and Yiqing Luo couldn't understand it. The two of them were whispering to each other. On the other side, the Bloodbone Barbarian King's chilly voice was bone-chilling. I don't believe it. I absolutely don't believe it. This deity will personally ascend to the divine realm and verify it. His voice sounded like he was on the verge of breaking down. He was on the verge of insanity. As soon as the roar ended, the skull, which was embedded in the bloodbone, suddenly charged towards Yiqing Luo's direction. The densely packed bones crashed against DMO Xian's defensive shield, which encircled him. The kind of ruthless feeling was as though he was going to stake his life on the line. That skull stopped in front of Yiqing Luo at a close distance, when it was blocked by the transparent defensive shield. The entire face was twisted and sinister. Its facial features were already deformed. Chapter 4166. The barbaric Bloodbone King roared as its bones collided more violently. That momentum was as though it had lost its rationality. That frenzied look made Yiqing Luo shocked. What's wrong with him? Yiqing Luo looked at DMO Xian. Although the barbaric Bloodbone King was crazy. But Yiqing Luo wasn't worried that the barbaric Bloodbone King would break through DMO Xian's protective shield. DMO Xian's eyes glanced at her indifferently as his large palm stroked her hair comfortingly, anxious to verify the fact that the Emperor of God has passed away. Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes. don't feel that his persistence towards the Emperor of God is a little abnormal? DMO Xian's hand on her head pressed her hard. Don't let your imagination run wild. No matter what feelings he has towards the Emperor of God, it has nothing to do with the Emperor of God. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and grabbed his large palm. Her long and narrow eyes stared at his eyes with a smile, yet not a smile. What are you looking at? DMO Xian looked down. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand tightly as a suspicious expression appeared on her face. You seem to have a kind of complicated feelings towards the sovereign of God Emperor as compared to the barbaric Blood King. Speaking of this, she squinted her eyes again. When you and the barbaric Bloodbone King were talking, it sounded like you were like someone who knew the Emperor of God thousands of years ago. The slender fingers on the hand she held in her palm suddenly moved. Yiqing Luo looked at his hand and raised her brows. Don't tell me you are really an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. She thought that she had lived for 2 lifetimes, and being together with DMO Xian was already considered as a sibling love. But now it seemed DMO Xian had lived for many times longer than her in both lifetimes. 10,000 years old monster. Yiqing Luo was shocked by this thought of hers. Her words, coupled with the messy expression on her face. DMO Xian's face turned black. His large palm directly pressed on Yiqing Luo's head. What kind of messy things are you thinking about in this brain of yours? This is a very serious deduction. Yiqing Luo said seriously, I am seriously suspecting that you are thinking of gnawing on this little tender flower of mine. DMO Xian's finger suddenly changed direction. His slender, jade-like fingers held her chin. That peerless countenance suddenly came close to Yiqing Luo. In the blink of an eye, the man's face, which was completely defenseless against her, enlarged. The fragrance of sandalwood filled the air. Yiqing Luo's vision couldn't help but tremble. Her eyes stared unblinkingly at the man's approaching face. Then, his deep and magnetic voice floated in her ears. Don't tell me. I'm a person who has lived for tens of thousands of years, and you're planning to abandon me? It was obviously the kind of pitiful and aggrieved words. But coming from the man's mouth, there was an inexplicable evil aura. It was very alluring. Yiqing Luo couldn't hold it in any longer. Not abandoning, not abandoning. Even if you're a 10,000-year-old monster, I still love you. DMO Xian narrowed his eyes. Huh? A 10,000-year-old monster? That N was deep and magnetic. Yiqing Luo's little heart melted for a moment. Look at that face, that voice. Which part of him looked like a person who had lived for 10,000 years? Cough, I don't mean that. What I mean is, even if you're really a person from 10,000 years ago, I won't despise you. Yiqing Luo's survival instinct was very strong as she immediately changed her words. DMO Xian's thin lips only twitched. Chapter 4167. Yiqing Luo. She probably couldn't coax him well. Who knew that men were also very concerned about their own age. The two of them acted as though there was no one else around, openly displaying their affection. It even agitated the barbaric Bloodbone King. The sinister eyes on that head were bloodshot red. It showed the barbaric Bloodbone King's raging emotions. Lad, do you really think this god can't do anything to you? The barbaric Bloodbone King's sinister voice was like a sharp blade. His voice had just ended. Like a spider web, the bloody bones that intersected with each other suddenly surged. It was no longer like before, using the blood bones to charge around. But, one by one, the blood bones quickly gathered around the both of them. Tightly, those drops of blood on the blood bones started to drip down drop by drop. The thick blood dripped onto the transparent protective shield that DMO Xian had conjured. In an instant, the surrounding shape was revealed. The transparent protective shield was dripping with large amounts of blood. The most important thing was that blood was like lava. After it floated on the protective shield, it would make a sizzling sound as it melted. But after a moment, the surroundings of the both of them were covered by a patch of red. Their ears were filled with that kind of melting sound. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly. Her eyes were blood red. Is he planning to melt your barrier directly? DMO, Xian hugged her slender body tightly. I'm not too sure about the effects of the barbaric Bloodbone King's bloodbones. You follow closely. The word I had yet to leave her mouth. Suddenly, a piercingly cold wind struck. Yi Qing Luo instantly felt a strong, majestic pressure pressing down from the top of her head. Her nose was filled with a thick smell of blood, and something dripped on her body. The clothes that came into contact with it, with a sizzle sound, a big hole was melted. The protective shield was really melted by the blood. Yi Qing Luo reacted swiftly, raised her hand to pull the sleeve which was dripping with blood, and tore it off, to prevent the blood, through the robe, from dripping onto her body. The protective shield was melted. Be careful. DMO Xian speedily hugged Yi Qing Luo tightly and stuffed her little body into his embrace. Yi Qing Luo could hear it clearly. It was the sound of Shui Gu's blood dissolving DMO Xian's robe. This blood, it could even dissolve DMO Xian's enchantment. Not to mention human flesh and blood. DMO Xian blocked it for her. What about himself? I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Think of a way to leave this place first. Yi Qing Luo stuck her head out from his arms, her eyes filled with worry. He raised his head. She saw that the man's luxurious purple robe had already been melted by the blood, revealing a large area of his fair skin. Because he had been circling her tightly, she was unable to escape. The blood flowed along the melted robe and dripped onto his skin. In an instant, it melted and turned pitch black. Yi Qing Luo could even feel the body of the man who was hugging her trembled slightly. Ah Xian! Yi Qing Luo's eyes turned red as she cried out urgently. His voice was choked with emotion. I can protect myself. I'm fine. The man's voice didn't have much fluctuation. His large palm pressed on her head and pushed her back into the room. Don't look. Ah Xian! Yi Qing Luo pursed her lips, her hands clutching his robe tightly. She wanted to struggle, but was afraid that her struggle would affect DMO Xian. This silly man, wouldn't she be worried if she didn't look? Chapter 4168. He didn't want her to get hurt. Did she want him to get hurt? DMO Xian carried the person in his arms as he swiftly shifted his position. However, the barbarian Bloodbone King had clearly anticipated this. Before the blood on the bones could dissolve everything, it had already used the blood on the bones to build solid walls of blood. It blocked DMO Xian from all directions. DMO Xian's sleeves fluttered. The majestic, profound energy kept vibrating. But there were just too many bones around, even if it smashed the large piece of bones in front of him. Soon after, a new wall of blood appeared, especially after the blood bones were broken. The blood that splashed out from the broken bone also scattered in all directions like a goddess scattering flowers. In such a situation, there was no way to break out of this space. Yi Qing Luo had been pressed in the man's arms. Her face was plastered on his chest, and her head couldn't move. Beside her ear was the man's steady and calm heartbeat, and the sound of blood dripping onto DMO Xian's body. Yi Qing Luo's hand, which was clutching his robe, tightened. Ah Xian, when you get hurt, my heart will ache too. Her voice was choked with sobs. Under this situation, DMO Xian had been protecting her and was being melted by the blood. As time went on, this kind of melting would melt the entire person. Just at this moment, DMO Xian's hand suddenly pressed on her body. Following that, she heard a heavy breathing. Yi Qing Luo's heart trembled violently. She quickly glanced sideways. She saw the man's purple robe, which was like flowing clouds, had been completely melted. On his arm, there was a scar. Yi Qing Luo stretched out her hand and grabbed his arm. Before she could open her mouth, her body suddenly felt a cold and sticky touch. Her body was suddenly lifted up by a force out of thin air. Following that, her four limbs were confined and unable to move. That sticky, like a poisonous snake, eroded her entire body. All of this, it happened too quickly. The barbaric Blood King apparently saw through the feelings between them. He was deliberately using such a method to force the two of them to be distracted. Little DMO Xian's eyes turned cold as he totally didn't care about the burnt mess on his body, as his figure speedily approached Yi Qing Luo's direction. A large amount of blood dripped down. Dmo Xian completely ignored it. His eyes were fixed on the young girl who was being restrained by the barbaric Bloodbone King. Although Yi Qing Luo's 4 limbs couldn't move, but her mind and consciousness were still clear. Looking at the man's desperate appearance, she struggled even harder. At this moment, her eyes were already dyed with a seductive red. On his wrist, the azure dew bracelet that resembled a cherry blossom totem was also faintly flickering with a faint flowing light. Xian, between his lips and teeth, he spat out a silent name. The expression on her face was also changing bit by bit. As for the blood-bone barbaric king, who had already lost his rationality, he totally did not notice the change in Yi Qing Luo. Seeing that Yi Qing Luo had been restrained, he manipulated the bloodbone to block Dmo Xian's path. Immediately after, it rushed towards Yi Qing Luo impatiently. "This body of yours, this god wants it." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Qing Luo felt that her body seemed to be squeezed into something, a strong and majestic sense of oppression. It made her body produce an intense rejection, but that gush of energy was still surging into her body. It was like wanting to occupy her everything, to swallow her everything. What on earth was the barbaric Blood King trying to do? Her body. Chapter 4169. Yi Qing Luo's pupils constricted. Could it be? Bloodbone barbaric king wanted to take over her body. Dream on. Yi Qing Luo's eyes turned cold. Her entire body shook. An inexplicable aura poured out. She only felt. Her own consciousness kept resisting against the energy that wanted to squeeze in. That inexplicable aura quickly wrapped around that power. Following that, Yi Qing Luo's mind went blank. Her consciousness was lost for a moment. A miserable shriek was heard. A blood-colored figure was sent flying. Yi Qing Luo felt her 4 limbs were loosened. She lost all support and fell from midair. A hand clasped her waist. He pulled her into his embrace. Yi Qing Luo opened her eyes tiredly as she leaned into the man's arms, panting slightly. What's going on? She totally didn't know what was going on. At that moment, her mind went blank and she lost consciousness. Then she regained consciousness. Her body was so weak that there was no energy at all. She couldn't even gather her profound energy. You actually... Not waiting for Yi Qing Luo to reply, that cold, sharp voice rang from the side. Yi Qing Luo turned her head in Dmo Xian's arms, seeing the disheveled skull embedded in the blood bones. But what shocked Yi Qing Luo the most was, in all directions, the densely packed bones that were intertwining with each other began to break apart one by one. With a speed visible to the naked eye, they started to break. What was going on? Why did Bloodbone Barbaric King suddenly become like this? Why is she in your body? It's actually you, it's you. Bloodbone Barbaric King seemed to have seen something on Yi Qing Luo as his eyes widened and his mouth kept screaming something. His shock and disbelief. Yi Qing Luo totally couldn't understand. She wanted to ask. Above her head, the man's deep and indifferent voice floated down. She is not someone you can spy on. Bloodbone Barbaric King shook his head. Impossible. Impossible. This god won't believe it. You are all lying to this god. This god absolutely won't believe it. He muttered softly. His expression was one of madness. Amidst the murmurs and roars, Yi Qing Luo felt a resistance pushing Dmo Xian. Another blink of an eye. The densely packed and broken bones in front of him had already disappeared. In front of them, it was already bright. This was the Linglong Palace. The barbaric Bloodbone King expelled them from his space. Yi Qing Luo frowned slightly, as she had many questions in her heart. However, he could not muster up any strength to sense the aura of the barbaric Bloodbone King. Her body was so exhausted that she didn't have the chance to think. Well, take a break. I will be by your side. The man's gentle voice, close to the ear, in a trance, his thin lips planted a kiss between her eyebrows. It was very light, very faint, but it had a reassuring warmth. In the next moment, Yiqing Luo couldn't resist the exhaustion in her body and fell into a deep sleep. He could vaguely hear someone talking beside his ear. Her power is about to awaken. It's about time. By the time Yiqing Luo opened her eyes again, she was already lying on a soft big bed. What greeted her eyes was a piece of white gauze. Her long, curly lashes fluttered as she woke up a little. Chapter 4170. This was an extremely luxurious and elegant room. The air was filled with the faint scent of sandalwood. It can make people calm down. This familiar and reassuring scent should have been prepared by Dmo Xian. He looked around. There was no one else in the house. She slowly got up. His limbs were weak. His body seemed to have been hollowed out by something. He couldn't muster up any strength in his body. She furrowed her brows. He just woke up after a nap. Why does my body feel so tired? Could it be from before? The Ling Long Palace Lord wanted to forcibly take over her body. And this was the repercussions? Didn't the Ling Long Palace master fail? Girl, you're finally awake. Old Man Song's figure slowly floated out from the azure dew bracelet. He floated to the side of Yiqing Luo's bed, his eyes filled with worry. How is it? Do you feel any discomfort anywhere? Yiqing Luo shook her head. I just can't muster up the strength. I'm fine. I'll be fine after a few days of rest. Old Man Song heaved a sigh of relief. Yiqing Luo looked at Old Man Song's expression and frowned even tighter. What's wrong? I'm fine. Old Man Song chuckled. Your current situation can be considered normal. When the Bloodbone Barbarian King tried to forcefully invade your body, it was repelled by the profound jade heart within your body as well as the power of the divine tool. Your body and soul have been affected during this process, which is why you are feeling so uncomfortable now. He explained in a relaxed tone. But Yiqing Luo somehow felt that Old Man Song's words seemed to be hiding something. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips but didn't probe further. She only nodded and asked, Where's Xian? Ling Long Palace Lord is dead, and the disciples of Ling Long Palace all thought that Ling Long Palace Lord was killed by the Overlord. Old Man Song saw Yiqing Luo changing the topic and immediately replied. Then he sighed. After all, the Ling Long Palace has a very good reputation in the land. Furthermore, it is the representative and symbol of the land. The death of the palace master of the Ling Long Palace will affect the entire land. Yiqing Luo lowered her head. She knew this very well. Everyone was ambitious. The Earth domain was divided into 3 main cities. Each main city wanted to unify the entire Earth domain and establish itself as the king. The existence of the Ling Long Palace just happened to maintain the balance of the 3 main cities. Now that the Ling Long Palace had collapsed, those ambitious people in the land domain would definitely become restless. It would not be easy to resolve the matter regarding the Ling Long Palace. Even if Dmo Xian stepped forward, he might not be able to suppress those ambitious people. Right now, the Bloodbone Barbarian King has no intention of rebuilding the Ling Long Palace. I reckon that he won't appear in the Earth domain for a while. Even if he does appear, he won't be interested in the Ling Long Palace. Old Man Song saw the worry on Yiqing Luo's face and comforted her. The Overlord naturally has his own considerations. You don't have to worry. Mentioning the Bloodbone Barbarian King, Yiqing Luo recalled the frenzied look of the Bloodbone Barbarian King when he heard that the God Emperor had passed away. She seemed to have thought of something as she suddenly raised her head and looked at Old Man Song. How can you be so sure that the barbaric Bloodbone King has no interest in the Ling Long Palace? Listening to Old Man Song's words, it seemed that Old Man Song also knew the Bloodbone Barbarian King. Old Man Song was startled. Only then did he realize that he had let slip. Just as he was about to change the topic, he saw Yiqing Luo staring at him intently. Chapter 4171. Yiqing Luo nodded. Bloodbone Barbarian King built the Ling Long Palace to seek revenge on the Divine Emperor. She paused and asked again. He wanted to make use of the Ling Long Palace to gather some power in the Earth realm. Yes, just like the previous King of Darkness. Old Man Song had no intention to hide. Initially, everyone thought that the Bloodbone Barbarian King was annihilated by the Divine Emperor, but in actual fact. The divine emperor only dispersed the blood-bone barbaric king's soul and sent him to the earth realm to sleep in eternal peace. Yi Qing Luo replied, "Isn't the blood-bone barbaric king cursed in the god realm? The existence that everyone hated? Why did the divine emperor spare his life and intentionally created the illusion that the blood-bone barbaric king had been annihilated? One must know that the blood-bone barbaric king used his body as nourishment, absorbing the flesh and blood of the god realm's people to maintain his life and increase his power. After doing these things, the divine emperor actually spared his life. She linked it to the blood-bone barbaric king's attitude towards the divine emperor. The melodramatic plot in Yi Qing Luo's mind started to ripple once again. "I don't know about this." Old Man Song interrupted Yi Qing Luo's wild imagination. He built the Linglong Palace in the Earth Realm, probably to use the same method to find a suitable body to absorb the other party's soul and energy. Like the Linglong Palace's profound maiden, Linglong Palace's disciples, their imposing manner were all nourishment for the blood-bone barbaric king, especially the Linglong Palace's lord. Not only to find a suitable body and power for the blood-bone barbaric king, and to find someone with a better body than himself, to become the blood-bone barbaric king's nourishment. Wasn't his soul dispersed by the divine emperor, and he slept in eternal peace? Why is he still awake? Yi Qing Luo asked. Old Man Song's expression was grave. The Linglong Palace was a force that suddenly rose hundreds of years ago and quickly took root in the Earth Realm, becoming the symbol of the Earth Realm. In other words, the blood-bone barbaric king had awakened hundreds of years ago. As for why, this point needed to be verified. I feel this matter will not end so soon. Yi Qing Luo's eyelids drooped down slightly as she thought of the blood-bone barbaric king's looks. She had an ominous premonition. Don't let your imagination run wild. Old Man Song retracted his solemn expression and revealed a smile. After knowing that the divine emperor has passed away, all of the barbaric blood-bone king's perseverance will disappear. He has lost the goal that he has been persisting in all this time. He will not be able to walk out of his dejection, so he will not come out to stir up trouble again. Yi Qing Luo did not reply. Would it not appear again? But before they were pushed out of that space by the blood-bone barbarian king, the way the barbaric blood-bone king looked at her was obviously not right. Once you've settled the matter of the Linglong Palace Hall, you will have to go to the Heaven Realm. Even if he appears again, he won't be able to go to the Heaven Realm to find you. Old Man Song comforted her. Although he has already awakened, he still can't leave the Earth Realm. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath. That's true, anyway. We're going to the Heaven Realm soon. She suppressed the restlessness in her heart. About half an hour later, DMO Xian's figure appeared in the room. Dressed in a purple robe, he moved like flowing clouds as he walked. When Yi Qing Luo's gaze fell onto the man's face, her eyes were filled with a smile. Ah, Xian. She stretched out her hands towards him. Chapter 4172. Yi Qing Luo's arms circled around his neck. Her body was still weak and feeble. You're back. The young lady was a little flustered, and her tone was also soft. DMO Xian bent down and kissed her forehead. Miss me? He carried the young lady and picked up her clothes from the side and helped her put it on. The young lady was too lazy to even lift her hand. Under the man's service, she was dressed neatly. The man took her into his arms again and walked slowly to the outer hall. The air was filled with the rich aroma of food, whetting one's appetite. After waking up from a deep sleep, Yi Qing Luo only felt weak all over, but she didn't feel hungry or thirsty. But at this moment, the table was filled with delicious and fragrant dishes. Yi Qing Luo's stomach immediately grumbled in response to the scene. She nestled in DMO Xian's arms. Her eyes were curved as she smiled. You feed me. On her matters. This man had always been very meticulous. DMO Xian carried her to the dining table and sat down. The young lady's body was still soft, with a soft and boneless feeling. Looking at her posture, DMO Xian's eyes only flickered slightly. Very quickly, he bent over and carried her in his arms again, then sat down and let the young lady lie in his arms. He took the food by the side and slowly fed it into Yi Qing Luo's mouth. Yi Qing Luo's expression was very lazy as she opened her mouth slowly and continued to eat her food, not knowing if it was an illusion. Yi Qing Luo felt a little weak when she was chewing the food. She didn't have the energy to ask Dimo Xian how to deal with the Linglong Palace's matters. While eating, rough footsteps were suddenly heard outside the door. Then, he saw a figure rushing in hastily. "Imperial Madam, I heard you're awake." Old Lai strode in and saw Yi Qing Luo, who was like a queen, nestled in the male pet's arms, receiving service. His eyes widened. "Imperial Madam, why do you look so sickly? Is this still the arrogant and mischievous Imperial Madam in my memory?" Yi Qing Luo. Was this considered as a compliment? Yi Qing Luo swallowed the food in her mouth and rolled her eyes at him. "What are you doing here? I heard that the monarch's wife has woken up. Of course, I have to come and have a look." Lao Lai said matter-of-factly. Then, he lowered his voice mysteriously. "But, madam, you'd better not let others see you like this." "What's wrong with me? She just woke up and didn't have any strength. Was there a need to exaggerate? You haven't seen the bronze mirror, have you?" Old Lai clicked his tongue and said, "The death of the Linglong Palace Lord has caused quite a ruckus. If others see your sickly appearance, they might take the opportunity to attack you." As he spoke, he stroked his white beard. "Some people will do anything to achieve their goals. It looks like you won't be able to be naughty in the near future. Why do you sound so disappointed? If she couldn't be mischievous, he wouldn't be able to do anything, right? Illusion, it's definitely an illusion." Lao Lai changed the topic as if he was trying to cover something up. "How on earth did you torture yourself like this? If it wasn't for the fact that you were captured by the Linglong Palace Lord and carried back by the Overlord, I would have thought that you had been living a shameless life with the Overlord for a few days." Old Lai, an icy cold and hoarse voice, spat out 2 words. His voice was obviously very soft. Chapter 4173. His back straightened up. His face was frivolous. Teasing and joking expression had turned serious. "Cough. I suddenly remembered that I still have something on." Old Lai turned his head and left. "Stop." Yi Qing Luo suddenly spoke out. Old Lai's feet stopped abruptly. When he felt 2 different gazes land on him, his body froze. "What do you mean by that?" Yi Qing Luo straightened her back from Dimo Xian's arms. Although her body was weak, her brows were filled with a weak expression. But when he asked this question, his expression changed. Unknowingly, the overflowing aura was still able to shock people. At least, Old Lai was shocked. "Don't listen to his nonsense. Be good. Eat something and fill your stomach first." Dimo Xian held Yi Qing Luo's waist and pressed her back into his arms. Yi Qing Luo's pink lips pursed slightly as her expression turned solemn. She raised her hand and blocked Dimo Xian's arm. Her hands were weak, but when she blocked Dimo Xian's arm, Dimo Xian held back his strength to avoid hurting her. "Old Lai, bring the bronze mirror over," Yi Qing Luo said. Old Lai's body stiffened as he looked at Dimo Xian for help. Dimo Xian didn't give a response. He didn't dare to move. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows rose slightly as there was an obvious chill in her eyes. Old Lai almost wanted to cry, but had no tears. Why was he so cheap that he couldn't wait to rush over after knowing that Yi Qing Luo had woken up? On one side was the Overlord, who obviously didn't want Madame D to know his current state. On the other side was Madame D, who could make the Overlord obedient. So, who did he listen to? No matter who he listened to, it was all wrong. In the end, Old Lai still put on a bitter face as he stared at the Overlord's frozen gaze. Step by step, he moved over to get the bronze mirror. Compared to the Overlord, Madame D was more terrifying. At least Madame D could control the Overlord. But the Overlord was obedient to Madame D, no matter how he looked at it. Following Madame D's words was the right choice. Old Lai raised the bronze mirror in front of Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo's expression was solemn as her gaze fell onto the bronze mirror. On seeing that blurry face in the bronze mirror, Yi Qing Luo was completely stunned. In the bronze mirror, the girl's face was pale and lifeless, as if she had lost all of her vitality. It was as if she was terminally ill. It was as if he would die in the next instant, no matter how she blinked her charming eyes. There wasn't much life in his eyes. But what was going on? Yi Qing Luo's hands touched her own face. Ever since she woke up, Old Man Song had never mentioned her condition. When DMO Xian saw her, his expression remained the same. Yi Qing Luo's eyes suddenly congealed as she raised her head and looked into DMO Xian's eyes. You know what's going on with me, right? I'm fine. DMO Xian held her little hands tightly, using his own warmth to infect her slightly icy cold hands. Rest for a few days, and you'll be fine very soon. Did something happen when the blood-bone barbaric king forcibly took over my body? Yi Qing Luo thought of herself. When her body was forcibly taken over, she had a moment of blankness. Although it was only for that moment, when she regained her senses. The blood-bone barbaric king had left her body, whereas she felt weak and powerless. It seemed like it started from that moment. Chapter 4174. DMO Xian turned silent. Yi Qing Luo held his hand tightly. Ah Xian, cough. That there's still many things in Linglong Palace that I need to settle. I'll make a move first. Old Lai saw that the situation was not right and hurriedly moved towards the main door. As he moved, he stared at the two of them who were looking at each other silently. Seeing that the two of them ignored him, Old Lai swiftly turned around and ran away. The door closed. The lights in the room dimmed. In the quiet room, only the sound of their breathing could be heard. Yi Qing Luo pursed her pink lips as she stared at the man's eyes without blinking. Ah Xian, tell me, what's wrong with my body? DMO Xian's obsidian-like eyes were overflowing with peach blossoms, like a pool of spring water. His expression was very grave. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. His slender and beautiful hand slowly held the young lady's little hand. Slender as jade fingers, the joints were exquisite, suffused with a faint glow of beautiful jade. Yi Qing Luo's gaze shifted to his fingers as she was dazzled momentarily. Broad and thick, holding the tender little hand, slowly placed it by the side of his lips, falling a kiss. The man's thin lips were boiling hot, imprinting Yi Qing Luo's hand as it became scorching hot. Lil Luo, don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you. His magnetic voice was slightly hoarse, with some unconcealable helplessness. Yi Qing Luo's body slightly stiffened. Long curly eyelashes blinked a few times. Suddenly, as though she realized something, her eyes looked at DMO Xian in a daze. She looked at that handsome face, which was filled with heartache and worry. Her heart thumped hard. Yi Qing Luo withdrew her hand from DMO Xian's hand. Her hands clenched tightly as she closed her eyes slightly, circulating the profound jade heart in her body. But it was completely empty. There was nothing there. The emptiness in her body was like a floating boat, wandering aimlessly on the vast sea. Once those tyrannical powers, when released, could collapse Mount Tai, destroy the four seas. Nothing at all. Her entire body was so weak that she couldn't even do normal actions. Now, even her own powers had completely disappeared. Yi Qing Luo's heart instantly sank. His pale face turned even paler. Little Luo, DMO Xian's warm embrace embraced the young lady tightly, suppressing the young lady's attempt to circulate her profound energy. This is only temporary. It won't affect your body. You'll be fine after a few days. How many days? Yi Qing Luo felt that her lips were very dry and the words that came out of her mouth were somewhat astringent. Very soon, DMO Xian hugged her tightly. I won't let anything happen to you. He did not give an exact time. This meant that DMO Xian had not thought of a way to recover her. Yi Qing Luo buried her head in the man's arms. She deeply inhaled the man's sandalwood scent. However, his heart could not calm down at all. She would become like this. It must be the after effects of the blood-bone barbarian king forcefully occupying her body. Little Luo, The man's worried voice came from above. He put his hands on her shoulders, trying to pull her away from his embrace and look at her. Yiqing Luo rubbed her head against his chest as her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, unwilling to raise her head. This is only temporary, believe me. DMO Xin didn't force her as he hugged her tightly again as his chin rested on the top of her head. Chapter 4175. In. Yiqing Luo replied in a muffled voice in his arms. I believe you. Don't be unhappy. DMO Xin lowered his eyes and caressed the young lady. It's not that I'm unhappy. Yiqing Luo rubbed her face in his arms for a while before she slowly raised her head. Her chin rested against his chest. She raised her head slightly. What she saw was his smooth chin. She opened her mouth and bit on the man's chin. Bright red lips, long and narrow eyes curved. The corners of her eyes bloomed with rippling poppy. It made the young lady's beautiful face even more flirtatious and charming. I just can't accept my useless self. It seemed that this bite had vented out all the depression in the young lady's heart. She released her lips and looked at the man's chin. His teeth had already formed a neat sound. Her eyes were filled with a satisfied smile. DMO Xian allowed the young lady to do whatever she wanted on him. When he saw the young lady's face, revealed a smile. His thin lips also raised into a smile as his voice was low and gentle. I'm here, and I have you. Yiqing Luo's arms hooked around his neck as she propped herself up and looked him in the eyes. You always blame me for not wanting to rely on you. Now I'm going to rely on you. DMO Xian's thin lips suddenly pressed down and planted a heavy kiss on the young lady's lips. A low and hoarse voice overflowed from his lips. I'm extremely honored. Yiqing Luo hugged the man tightly as her chin rested on the man's shoulder. Under the big smile, it covered the young lady's brows, that piece of melancholy that couldn't be dispelled. The next few days, Yiqing Luo had been cooped up in the room. No matter who it was, she closed the door and refused to see them. DMO Xian had been accompanying her. If there was anything that needed to be settled, he would let Tang Beiyuan and Lang Lixian guard the door to prevent any accidents from happening. After Yiqing Luo lost her profound energy, she lost the infusion of energy. Even the connection between the profound Phoenix Ring and the profound Dragon Ring was cut off. No matter how troublesome the Linglong Palace's matter was, DMO Xian didn't dare to be too far away. Basically, if there was any special movement on Yiqing Luo's side, he would rush over immediately. Yiqing Luo, who was cooped up in the room, smiled helplessly after she knew this. No choice. Who asked her to be so frivolous? He had made quite a few enemies. On top of that, there was also the elusive Dark Palace eyeing them from the dark. If news of her current state were to spread, it was definitely going to be a mess. Yiqing Luo leaned against the headboard. There wasn't the slightest smile on her face when she was facing DMO Xian. After learning that he had lost his power and became a cripple, he was shocked. Even if he knew, it was only temporary. It was impossible for him not to feel sad. She just didn't want DMO Xian to worry about her. He didn't want everyone to worry about him. She didn't want to show off that she cared a lot about losing her power. The matter of the Linglong Palace was very complicated. After all, it could be considered the faith of a land. It was enough to make DMO Xian badly battered. She did not want to be a burden to DMO Xian. Yiqing Luo, come out. Suddenly, an angry roar filled with resentment came from a door. Then came the footsteps of someone trying to force their way over. But she was blocked by Lang Lixian's raised hand. Without Lord Dizun's orders, no one is allowed to disturb Lady Matriarch. Chapter 4176. Please return. Lang Lixian's expression did not change. He had the appearance of an old cadre. If I don't see her today, I will absolutely not leave. That person gnashed her teeth in anger. This saintess must demand an explanation for the Linglong Palace master. Wu Fu if you don't stop, don't blame me for taking action. Tang Beiyuan said impatiently. A woman who has to rely on the Overlord to resolve everything. Only you people would treat her as the mistress of the Imperial Palace. Wu Fu laughed coldly. Come, do you really think the saintess is afraid of you? As she spoke, Wu Fu Xian energy burst forth from her body, and she got into an attacking stance. Tang Biyuan's expression was cold. She raised her hand and was about to attack. Suddenly, a young girl's clear and serene voice rang out from the room. Beiyuan, let her in. Qing Luo. Tang Biyuan's hands paused as her expression changed drastically. For the past few days, she had been guarding outside the door. Naturally, he knew about Yi Qing Luo's current condition. If Yi Qing Luo saw Wu Fuer and Wu Fuder suddenly attack Yi Qing Luo, what should she do? The risk was too great. It doesn't matter. Doesn't she want an explanation? I'll have a good talk with her. Yi Qing Luo's tone was indifferent. Ha! A glint flashed across Wu Fuer's eyes. She retracted her attacking stance and raised her head arrogantly. Did you hear that? It's your master who wants to see me. Don't block the way. Tang Biyuan's face was livid, and she refused to budge. Wu Fu straightened her back and strode towards the door. When he approached Tang Biyuan, he even puffed out his chest and bumped into her. Tang Biyuan's eyes burned with anger. She clenched her fist and was about to punch. Beside her, Lang Lixian held her hand and shook his head slightly at her. Wu Fu swaggered into the room with her head held high. Only then did Lang Lixian let go of Tang Beiyuan and said in a low voice, "Go find Dizun." Tang Beiyuan pursed her lips and stared at the closed door for a moment. She gritted her teeth and said, "Pay attention to what's going on inside. I'll go look for His Majesty right away." Inside the house, Wu Fu stepped into the room. That arrogance of hers had mysteriously dissipated. She did not know why, but her heart inexplicably began to beat uneasily. His originally arrogant face also became nervous, and his heart trembled. It was as if the air was filled with a kind of pressurizing aura. It made her a little breathless. Wu Fu didn't want to admit it, but he had to admit it. This was emanating from his bones, the fear towards Yi Qing Luo. Following the sound, she slowly walked into the inner hall. The room was decorated very elegantly. The scent of sandalwood in the air was soothing, but it made her heart tighten even more. It was as if he was looking at His Majesty right in front of him. The light in the room was dim and hazy. Her gaze slowly fell on the bed, the young girl who was leaning against the headboard. The luxurious and exquisite undergarments wrapped around the girl's beautiful figure. She just leaned against the wall. The lines of her figure were soft and smooth. The girl's black hair cascaded down like a waterfall, silky and thick. Between her brows was a lazy and cold gaze. Her half-squinted, charming eyes were suffused with a faint, cold glint. That pink lips slightly curled up into a smile. Although it looked delicate and charming, it inexplicably made one's scalp go numb and a chill run down their spine. Just a glance. Chapter 4177. Why? Don't you want to see me? The young lady's voice was filled with indifference and laziness. Wu Fu shuddered, as though she just realized her motive for coming here. Her eyes were fixed on the person on the bed. Her gaze was burning, as though she wanted to confirm something. But after staring at the young lady for some time, her brows were knitted into a knot. Yin Free City's mysterious lady. Didn't you make a big fuss outside earlier? Now you're speechless when you see me? Yi Qing Luo's eyes were filled with ridicule. Wu Fu's face flushed red as her eyes widened. Who's speechless? She would never admit it. She was stunned by Yi Qing Luo's imposing manner. The prideful woman raised her chin arrogantly and said, "You instigated the Overlord to kill our temple master. You're alone, hiding in the room like a turtle. What kind of ability is that?" Yi Qing Luo's eyebrows rose. Her long and narrow eyes were like a cat looking at her lazily. "Oh, my Xian killed the Linglong Palace Master? Do you have any evidence?" Wu Fu bit her lower lip. "Do I still need any evidence? You were taken away by the Hall Master, and the Overlord went to save you. So he killed the Hall Master. You saw it with your own eyes?" Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards with a "are you an idiot" expression. "You didn't see it with your own eyes and have no evidence. On what basis do you say that Xian killed the Linglong Palace Master? Other than the Overlord, who else can kill the Hall Master?" Wu Fu, or thought that Yi Qing Luo was quibbling. Yi Qing Luo tilted her head, her index finger lightly tapped on her lips, and said evilly, "She committed suicide." "Nonsense," Wu Fu retorted without hesitation. "If you want to find an excuse, you should find a better one. How could the Hall Master possibly commit suicide?" "Oh, then, it was the palace master of the secluded palace who killed her?" Yi Qing Luo smiled. "That's even more impossible." Wu Fu exploded. "Brother Gong would never kill the Hall Master because of you. You're such a fickle woman. You've already seduced His Majesty, and now you're trying to seduce Brother Gong." TSK. Yi Qing Luo clicked her tongue. At the mention of her beloved brother, his battle prowess soared up. Why didn't he have this kind of fighting strength when he was denouncing Lord Hall Master? A few seconds of silence for the palace master of the Ling Long Palace. The girl's face still had that kind of carefree and lazy expression. It was as if he had no reaction to her anger at all. This made Wu Fu feel very frustrated. "Are you done?" Yi Qing Luo asked with a smile. Wu Fu bit her lip and clenched her fists tightly as she looked at the unaffected young girl. She forced herself to calm down. Her motive for coming here wasn't to question Yi Qing Luo and the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness's relationship. She couldn't let Yi Qing Luo say a few words to make her flustered. "Yi Qing Luo, no matter how you quibble, Hall Master died because of you. That is the truth. I'm going to kill you and take revenge for the Hall Master." Wu Funer's eyes turned cold as her palm suddenly moved and her profound energy exploded, striking towards Yi Qing Luo's face. This palm strike was like a hot knife through butter. It brought along an extremely strong force. Lang Lixian, who was outside the door, sensed this energy fluctuation. He instantly broke through the door and rushed into the room. "Mistress!" But it was too late. Chapter 4178. Wu Fu, don't you dare. After informing DMO Xian about this matter, Tang Beiyuan rushed back and happened to see this scene. Her eyes turned red. Using the fastest speed in his life, he dashed forward. Yi Qing Luo had not only temporarily lost her profound energy, her own strength. She couldn't even exert her strength. Facing Wu Fu's attack, Yi Qing Luo couldn't avoid it at all. But at this moment, with a bang, a figure flew out of the room and landed heavily on the ground. The ground cracked, revealing a huge, deep pit. Gravel flew everywhere. Smoke curled up. Faintly, a figure could be seen lying in the deep pit. At the same time, there were numerous people outside the courtyard. Before the crowd could get a clear look, they saw a purple figure rushing over. That figure was tall and imposing. His purple robe rippled in all directions like flowing clouds under the powerful qi. That man's long arm reached out. The young lady lying lazily on the bed was pulled into the man's arms. Wait a minute. On the bed? Then, the one who was sent flying was not Qing Luo. Tang Beiyuan stared blankly at the man's arms, that languid, elegant cat-like young lady, her eyes filled with tears of excitement. Luckily Qing Luo was fine. A large palm from behind her rested on her shoulder. The thick palm brought a reassuring feeling. Tang Beiyuan glanced sideways and met with Lang Lixian's calm eyes. He gently pulled her into his arms and said in a low voice, "Madam will not let anything happen to you." Tang Beiyuan pursed her lips tightly. Her gaze shifted little by little to the direction of the deep pit in the ground. The smoke dispersed. The person lying in the deep pit. Wasn't that Wu Fu? Tang Beiyuan was stunned. What was going on? Could it be that Qing Luo had regained her strength? But looking at Qing Luo in the arms of the Overlord, it didn't look like she had regained her strength. If she hadn't regained her strength, how did she do it? When Wu Fu attacked her, not only was she safe and sound, but she even repelled Wu Fu. Cough! Cough! The person in question, Wu Fu, was also very confused. She felt as if her entire body had been broken. His 5 viscera and 6 bowels were also shattered. When he coughed, he would even cough out large mouthfuls of blood. She was in so much pain that her whole body was curled up. Yama Mystic Maiden. When the Linglong Palace's disciples saw this, they immediately rushed forward and wanted to help him up. But before he could get close, a formless air wave came toward him. Profound waves rippled in the air. All the Linglong Palace disciples who were near Wu Fu were pushed away. The Linglong Palace's disciples trembled and looked towards the source of the chi wave in horror. His eyes met with a pair of cold, black eyes. It was just a slight match. He felt as if he was in an ice house. They shivered and immediately lowered their heads, not daring to move an inch. It was the Overlord. Dizun was stopping them from getting close to the Empyrean City Ferry. Now, the entire Linglong Palace was almost under the control of Dizun. Dizun stopped them from approaching Wu Fu Air. How could they dare to disobey? Everyone could see that. This was Wu Fu's own doing. Offending Dizun was equivalent to offending Dizun. No one cared about Wu Fu, who was lying on the ground, twitching. Tears and blood mixed together. Chapter 4179. Are you hurt anywhere? DMO Xian didn't even look at Wu Fu, but lowered his eyes to look at the person in his arms as he asked gently. He asked while asking. His gaze swept over Yiqing Luo from top to bottom. Yiqing Luo's lips curled as she leaned her head on his shoulder. No matter, I know what I'm doing. Looks like I have to tie you to my side at all times. DMO Xian's tone was slightly displeased. The moment I'm not by your side, you start to create trouble. Yiqing Luo cried out in injustice. I'm very obedient, extremely obedient. DMO Xian lowered his head and bit her nose lightly, indicating that he didn't believe her words. Yiqing Luo snorted. The too sweet atmosphere made the surrounding people not dare to disturb them. Just at this moment, suddenly, he heard the sound of hurried footsteps approaching from afar. Following that, they saw a lady dressed in a green lotus robe rushing over. Her vision fell onto Wu Fu, who was deeply embedded in the pit. When she saw Wu Fu's current state, tears streamed down her face. Fua. Wasn't that person Wu Fu's grandmother, Hallmaster Wu Yin? Perhaps DMO Xian's heart was on Yiqing Luo. Or perhaps DMO Xian didn't intend to stop the two of them from interacting. Hallmaster Wu Yin easily rushed to Wu Fu's side and speedily fed the pill into Wu Fu's mouth. At the same time, he injected profound qi into Wu Fu. Grandma. Wu Fu was in so much pain that her body was twitching, but her consciousness was extremely clear. When she saw Hallmaster Wu Yin, her stomach was filled with grievances as it surged up. Fu, don't talk. Hallmaster Wu Yan's voice was trembling as he held his granddaughter's icy cold hand tightly. When the pill entered her stomach, the pain in Wu Fu's body was finally alleviated. But that face was still terrifyingly pale. Hallmaster Wu Yan's heart ached as he trembled as he caressed Wu Fu's icy cold face, tears flowing down uncontrollably. Grandma, Fu is in so much pain. Wu Fu lay in Hallmaster Wu Yan's arms and cried. Hallmaster Wu Yan hugged her, his heart aching for her. Grandma will help you. She hugged Wu Fu and stared hatefully at Yiqing Luo's direction. Imperial Madam, Fu is just young and impetuous. Even if she did something wrong, you shouldn't have been so ruthless. After killing our palace master, do you still want to kill the only mysterious fairy of our palace of Linglong? Hallmaster Wu Yan's words had indirectly reminded the disciples of the Linglong Palace Hall. This Yiqing Luo was also responsible for the murder of the other two mystical maidens. Now, the palace master of the Linglong Palace had also killed the palace master of the Linglong Palace. Because of her, Yiqing Luo could be said to be the enemy of Linglong Palace. Every single word and sentence was to provoke the Linglong Palace's disciples' hatred towards Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo, who had long seen through everything, raised her brows without any change in expression as she looked at Hallhead Wu Yin, her eyes filled with ridicule. Hallhead Wu Yin, have you forgotten? I seem to be younger than that precious granddaughter of yours. Young and impetuous? When she said this, could she use some brains? Using Hallhead Wu Yan's words, Being younger can only be considered as being young and impetuous. Even if she did something wrong, she shouldn't be punished, right? Chapter 4180. Hall head Wu Yan's face was twisted into a ball, as she had not expected Yi Qing Luo to use the loophole in her words to counterattack. If you can't do it yourself, what right do you have to ask me? Yi Qing Luo sneered. Moreover, I've already said this many times, your Hall Master and those few profound nymphs' deaths have nothing to do with me. If you've ascertained that it's me, please bring out the evidence. After a slight pause, Yi Qing Luo's smile turned into a sneer. It's just a matter of opening your mouth. Can I also say that you were dissatisfied with the palace master of the Linglong Palace and wanted me to become the next palace master's successor? So you tried to usurp the throne and killed the palace master of the Linglong Palace? What nonsense are you talking about? Hall leader Wu Yan's face turned ashen as he retorted. Yi Qing Luo shrugged her shoulders. Everyone knows about Sima Zhao's intentions. Do you really think that no one can see through your ambition? Hall Master Wu Yan's body suddenly froze, and he retorted with a panicked expression. I have worked hard for the Linglong Palace for decades, and have wholeheartedly assisted the palace master. I would never dare to be disloyal. You outsider, why are you slandering me? What are your intentions? Yi Qing Luo smiled without saying a word. That smile seemed to be mocking Hall Master Wu Yan's sophistry. No one would believe him. Hall Chief Wu Yan's expression was extremely ugly. As a disloyal person, she had been exposed in front of him. He felt the most guilty. He totally didn't notice that unknowingly, he had been led into a rhythm by Yi Qing Luo, totally forgetting to denounce his own granddaughter. His heart was filled with the desire to defend himself. Becoming the Linglong Palace Master through the proper channels, or becoming the Linglong Palace Master through schemes. The meaning between the two was completely different. Grandmother. Wu Fu Air cried pitifully in Wu Yan's arms. She swallowed the pill that Hall leader Wu Yan had fed her. The intense pain of having his body and mind shattered had already subsided. But this didn't mean that she would let Yi Qing Luo off easily. She must seek justice for her grandmother. Yi Qing Luo dared to make a move on her, the only mysterious fairy in Linglong Hall. He had to pay the price for this. However, to Wu Fu Er's disappointment, even if Hall leader Wu Yan wanted to feel heartache for her grievances, he could not even take care of himself. Because the moment Wu Fu Er opened her mouth, she felt wronged. The man's indifferent and cold gaze had already landed on Hall leader Wu Yan. His red lips curled up frivolously. His smile was cold. Even the light in his eyes was cold. In an instant, Hall leader Wu Yan felt a chill run down his spine. His throat seemed to be blocked by something, and he could not speak. This senior has already said that this senior will deal with the matter regarding the Linglong Palace Master. The man's deep and magnetic voice was extremely dignified as it reverberated in the air. The moment he opened his mouth, almost in an instant, the entire place quietened down. Hall Master Wu Yan. Suddenly, DMO Xian called out Hall Master Wu Yan. These 4 words caused Hall Chief Wu Yan's body to tense up even more. The man's cold words fell into her ears. Do you still remember what I said on the first day I arrived at the Linglong Palace? Hall Master Wu Yan abruptly raised his head as he looked at DMO Xian with a pale face. She subconsciously hugged her granddaughter tightly in her arms, and her lips trembled a little. DMO Xian's lips curled coldly, as the sneer in his eyes deepened. If you've forgotten, this senior doesn't mind helping you recall. Following these words, the surrounding air seemed to have condensed into frost. Chapter 4181. Hall head Wu Yan's throat tightened. He could hear the threat in DMO Xian's words and didn't dare to pretend that he didn't understand DMO Xian's words. He immediately lowered his eyes and pursed his lips. The Overlord said that no one is allowed to disturb Madame D during this period. DMO Xian's smile turned colder. There was no emotion in his frozen eyes. He spat out 2 words. Ah Xian. Langley Xian understood and patted the girl's head in his arms. He walked towards Hall head Wu Yan expressionlessly. Hall head Wu Yan's face tightened. He immediately carried Wu Fu Er and wanted to retreat. But Langley Xian just stretched out his hand. He lifted Wu Fu by the collar and lifted her up from Hall Head Wu Yan's arms. Hall Head Wu Yan was anxious to save his granddaughter. But before he could get close, he was stopped by Tang Bei Yuan. Hall Master Wu Yan, the Empyrean fairy of Yin City, came to find the emperor's wife on her own despite knowing that it was the emperor's order. She even tried to kill the emperor's wife. Is the Empyrean fairy of Yin City looking down on the imperial palace, or is she acting on your orders? Tang Bei Yuan deliberately dragged out her words and raised her tone. It seemed to be a taunt and a threat. Hall Master Wu Yin shook his head in panic. Fu doesn't have any ill intentions. She just wants to ask the imperial madam what happened when the Hall Master died. She just wants to investigate the truth behind the Hall Master's death. This explanation was too far-fetched. Hall Head Wu Yin felt guilty when he said it himself. Tang Bei Yuan raised her hand and stopped Hall Head Wu Yan's explanation. Yin Wu City's mysterious maiden barged into Madame D's resting room and attacked her. This is the truth. Hall Head Wu, you need not say any more. The more you say, I can't help but suspect if Yin Wu City's mysterious maiden's actions are really related to you. These few words caused Hall Chief Wu Yin to stop trying to snatch Wu Fu back. Wu Fu was so scared that her face turned pale. Tears welled up in her eyes. Grandma. But no matter how she called out aggrievedly, Hall Head Wu Yin could only bear the pain and turn his head away. In this situation, if she was really implicated, neither of them could escape. Hall Chief Wu Yin listened to the aggrieved cries that made her heart ache. She clenched her fists tightly and suppressed the surging impulse in her heart. Under DMO Xian's suggestion, Langley Xian brought Wu Fu away. Without the sound of her crying, the surroundings were extremely quiet. The onlookers did not dare to break the silence. DMO Xian carried Yi Qing Luo in his arms as he turned around and strode into the room. The door suddenly closed, blocking the view of the outside world. Tang Bei Yuan looked at the trembling crowd before her and smirked. Today's lesson is to tell you not to disturb Lady D. Even if you offend His Majesty, you shouldn't offend Lady D. Do you understand? Inside the house, DMO Xian carried her back to the inner hall. The girl kept her eyes closed as she rested. Only when her body leaned against the soft bed did she lazily open her eyes. Has it been solved? Very tired? DMO Xian didn't answer her question, but sat by the bedside and kissed her sleepy brows. Yi Qing Luo shut her eyes, and her voice was lazy. Still all right, just a little tired. Nestled in DMO Xian's arms, her consciousness started to blur as she was half asleep. Chapter 4182. If you know that you're tired, you still want to see that woman? DMO Xian's tone was somewhat displeased as he lowered his head and bit her lips. Yi Qing Luo was in pain, and her body struggled a little as she stared at him resentfully. I'm already so uncomfortable, and you're still not going to comfort me. Her tone was filled with the coquettish manner of a young girl. DMO Xian's feigned anger could no longer be maintained as he helplessly hugged her delicate body tightly. Why should I comfort you? He asked for it. His mouth was full of complaints, but his movements were gentle and affectionate. Yi Qing Luo leaned into the man's arms. Her charming eyes squinted. Her posture was as lazy as a cat. If I don't see her, I'm afraid the consequences will be even more troublesome. This is the best solution I can think of. What if anything happens? DMO Xian pinched her nose. I'll be worried about you, understand? Yi Qing Luo nudged her head against his chest. I know, so I'm very serious about protecting myself. She raised her head and rested her chin on DMO Xian's chest, looking up at his peerless countenance. Ah, Xian, tell me, who was the person who sent Wu Fu to my courtyard to create trouble? DMO Xian knew that this little woman was trying to change the topic. He cooperated and didn't continue to harass the girl. He answered the girl's question. Don't you already have the answer in your heart? Yi Qing Luo tilted her little head and blinked her charming eyes. There are too many guesses, and there's no way to confirm and verify. Yes, right from the start, Yi Qing Luo had purposely chosen to meet Wu Fu. This was because Wu Fu had insisted on meeting her at this critical juncture, and had even made a big fuss about it. wasn't it so that he could see her with his own eyes? And the reason to see her? He just wanted to confirm her current condition. After all, if the person behind the scenes was really related to the Dark Nether Palace, the matters between her and the Hall Master of the Ling Long Palace and the barbaric Bloodbone King, as well as the fact that she might have lost her profound energy. It was not surprising that the Palace of Darkness would know about it. Therefore, Wu Fu'er was sent to test and confirm whether she had really lost her powers. Because ever since the news of the Ling Long Palace Lord's death spread out, Yi Qing Luo then faded out of everyone's line of sight. Even if it was mentioned, the answer he gave was that the Imperial Madam was not feeling well and was currently recuperating. These were all similar excuses. This made the other party suspicious. Had Yi Qing Luo really suffered some sort of injury in the confrontation with the barbaric Bloodbone King, causing any repercussions, etc.? Because of this, Wu Fu'er appeared. Of course, this was only her guess. The person behind this might not be someone from the Dark Palace. The reason why Yi Qing Luo would allow Wu Fu'er to enter the room if she was not careful was to make use of Wu Fu'er to eliminate the other party's guesses. Wu Fu'er had always been afraid of her. Trembling with fear, he braced himself and entered the room, shouting all sorts of things. But on seeing that Yi Qing Luo was safe and sound, and her relaxed attitude, which part of her looked like someone who had lost her profound energy or someone who was not feeling well. This is a sense. This made Wu Fu'er's fear towards Yi Qing Luo even more. Because of this, when he faced Yi Qing Luo, he was filled with fear and uneasiness. Chapter 4183. The room door was opened by someone again. It was Old Lai, Patriarch Xiao, and the rest. Tang Beiyuan was following behind. Old Lai was the first to bear the brunt as his eyes were filled with joy. Madame D, have you regained your strength? Earlier, they were among those who rushed over with Dmo Xian when the news of Linglong Palace Lord's death had spread throughout the Earth Realm, and when the death of Linglong Palace Lord was related to the Overlord. Almost all the influential figures in the Earth Realm had rushed over to Linglong Palace Lord. These few days, everyone looked calm on the surface, but in actual fact, they were all testing each other. Patriarch Xiao, Old Lai, and the rest also knew that Yi Qing Luo had temporarily lost her strength. So they went to find trouble with Wu Fu'er. One by one, they rushed over. Coincidentally, they saw the scene of Wu Fu'er being sent flying onto the ground. No. Yi Qing Luo looked at their joyous gazes as she shook her head slowly. No. Old Lai looked at her in astonishment. No? Then how did you do it earlier, to send Yin Free City's mysterious maiden flying with one palm? The joy on the faces of the others also gradually faded. Yi Qing Luo's weak body, plus the situation of losing her profound energy. After a long time, it was easy to arouse suspicions from all sides, and very easy to get into trouble. Yi Qing Luo smiled, but it was a smokescreen for Wu Fu'er's fear of me. No matter who the person behind Wu Fu'er was, the matter that the other party wanted to investigate would be completely dispelled because of Yi Qing Luo's actions today. After all, if Yi Qing Luo's body was really affected by the barbaric Bloodbone King, then she wouldn't be able to meet Wu Fu'er so boldly and send Wu Fu'er flying with one palm. I can tell that Lil Luo is well prepared. Dmo Xian placed the young lady on the bed and pulled the blanket over to cover her up. He then sat by the bed and held her hand as his gaze fell onto a certain spot. When he spoke, the corners of his mouth curled up in a mocking manner. Yi Qing Luo followed his gaze and looked over. A transparent white figure who was hiding in the corner was faintly discernible in the air. She was discovered just like that. This man was too perceptive. Yi Qing Luo held onto Dmo Xian's hand, not letting his line of sight to intimidate that figure in the dark. Their attention was not diverted by Dmo Xian. They were all placed on Yi Qing Luo, their faces filled with astonishment. What camouflage! He's that powerful? This wasn't just because she knew that Wu Fu'er was afraid of her. Even they couldn't tell that it was a smokescreen. Yi Qing Luo smiled, and when she lowered her eyes, Her slender fingers gently caressed the cherry blossom totem on her wrist. His smile was a little unfathomable. On the other side, Old Man Tsang, who had received the warning from Di Guang, expressed his bitterness. He should have directly flown back into the Azure Dew bracelet. Why was he so nosy that he had to hide in his room in his spiritual body form to watch the show? As a matter of fact, Di Zun found out. Furthermore, he looked at Di Zun's eyes. He seemed to be very unhappy about the cooperation he had given Luo Yu. Was she blaming him for not stopping Luo Bingyao from fooling around? Instead, he was fooling around with her? Could he be blamed for this? What could he do? He was in despair, all right? Did he look like someone who could reject Luo Yu? Did Luo Yu look like someone who would give up after being rejected? If it was the Overlord himself, could he reject Luo Yu? Chapter 4184. Yes, the so-called camouflage. But she had secretly borrowed the strength of Old Man Tsang. After losing her profound energy, the divine weapon she carried could not be activated without the infusion of profound energy. Even the Azure Dew bracelet could not be activated. Only Old Man Tsang in the Azure Dew bracelet could move freely. Therefore, Yiqing Luo made use of Wu Fu Air's fear of her. When Wu Fu Air launched an attack, Old Man Yu Tsang appeared and sent him flying. Old Man Tsang was just a spiritual existence. Basically, he could not attract anyone's attention, especially Wu Fuer, who was terrified. Not to mention, she could not identify where the power to counter her came from. But she did not expect DMO Xian to see that it was Old Man Tsang who was secretly helping her. Old Lai asked a few more questions. Yiqing Luo had just dealt with Wu Fu Air, and her body was already exhausted. In a daze, he heard DMO Xian chasing the few of them out. Shortly after, the man climbed onto the bed. His strong arms pulled her body into his embrace. Lying on the man's broad chest, her nose was filled with the man's elegant sandalwood scent. It was a soothing scent, made her fall into a deep sleep. Inside the dark palace, the surroundings were filled with black qi and yin qi. Several figures in black cloaks stood respectfully on both sides of the hall, and in the middle was a tall figure half kneeling on the ground. That person was also covered from head to toe in a black robe, and his face could not be seen clearly. In front of them, it was a black curtain. The curtain fluttered lightly, like black smoke rippling. It rippled with an invisible and treacherous chill. The few of them couldn't help but shiver under the cold. Finally willing to come back, behind the black curtain came a cool, cold voice without any warmth. That voice made one's scalp tingle. The black-robed man who was half kneeling on the ground knelt even lower, his forehead touching his head. His voice trembled. "Mas, master. You still know that I am your master?" The cold voice sneered. The tone was filled with a dangerous aura. The person kneeling on the ground trembled and said with a trembling voice, "This disciple doesn't dare." As soon as the black-robed man finished speaking, the air seemed to be filled with a cold glint. All of a sudden, a sharp force rushed down. The black-robed man didn't even have time to scream before he was sent flying by the force. He smashed into the wall and vomited blood. The black-robed man's body landed heavily on the ground again. The black-robed man did not stop at all. He forced his swaying body to kneel on the ground again. A large mouthful of blood gushed out from his mouth. His mouth was still saying, "Your disciple doesn't dare. Your disciple doesn't dare. Why wouldn't you dare?" The cold voice sounded like an Azura from hell. "I know I was wrong." The black-robed man curled up and begged for mercy in a low voice. The gloomy voice sneered a few times. Suddenly, she heard that cold and gloomy voice with a hint of malice. "You like her?" The back of the black-robed man stiffened. He quickly raised his head and said, "Master, your disciple didn't. The cold voice sneered. His tone was full of ridicule. "You disobeyed my orders and secretly sent her a message. That's called didn't?" The eyes under the black robe revealed a horrified expression. Chapter 4185. When that cold voice chuckled, the entire person, even the pores, exuded a chill. "Not going to quibble anymore. Master is so resourceful. No matter how this disciple quibbles, I can't hide it from Master. The black-robed person's voice trembled. This disciple is willing to accept the punishment. There's no need to accept the punishment. The cold voice sounded cold. After all your actions have become the key to help this seat achieve my goal. The black-robed person's body trembled. Her face turned pale. In his heart, thinking of himself these few times, whether it was meeting her privately or wanting to take her away, it would turn the matter into a series of things which were pushed by him. It was no wonder she was unwilling to believe him. In his heart, no matter how much indignation, he also didn't dare to express any opinion. He also didn't dare to follow Master's words, act obedient to seek favor. This seat's good, disciple. The cold voice sighed faintly. Want to get her? The black-robed person's fingers suddenly curled up. Master. He was vigilant in his heart. He wanted to plead for her. Once Master had his eyes on her, she would not be able to escape. But the words begging for mercy were at the tip of his tongue. But when he met that pair of treacherous cold eyes behind the black curtain, he stiffly dared not to open his mouth. The cold voice laughed in a low voice. This seat's good, disciple, don't forget. That red clear pavilion's pavilion lord also admires her. An overlord, a red clear pavilion's pavilion lord. Do you think, just based on you, can get the beauty back? Suddenly, his tone abruptly increased. Just answer, do you want or not? The black-robed person's heart instantly jumped. Yes. He almost blurted out. There was no room for regret. You are this seat's most beloved disciple. Whatever you want, this seat will naturally get it for you. That cold and gloomy voice cackled. Obviously, the words sounded like concern for the black-robed person. However, his tone was enough to make one tremble with fear. Linglong Palace. Yiqing Luo slowly opened her eyes in the midst of sleepiness. The man was no longer by her side. She lazily stretched out a hand. The position beside him was also ice-cold. Come to think of it, the man must have accompanied her until she fell into a deep sleep, then left. Yiqing Luo stretched herself. His whole body was still limp, and he couldn't muster up any strength. In the past few days, he even needed someone to serve him 3 meals a day. She was already used to it. His heart would no longer be like before, constantly wondering when he would be able to regain his former strength. She was anxious. The people around her were actually more anxious than she was. These few days, Yiqing Luo had also understood a little from Old Man Song. Her body had become like this. It was probably when the barbaric Bloodbone King was forcefully occupying her body. The force that had forcefully entered her body had blocked a certain place in her profound heart jade. That was why he temporarily lost his strength. He was unable to circulate his profound heart jade. After all, it was related to the cultivation of one's profound strength, as well as the circulation of one's profound jade heart. Before I can find the blockage. However, he did not dare to act rashly. All he could do was find out where the blockage was. Then he would unblock the blockage. Only then could he recover his strength. Now that things had come to this, Yiqing Luo could only wait patiently. This kind of matter couldn't be rushed. Roar, roar. Suddenly, something furry rubbed against her feet. Immediately following that, a white furry little head popped out from the blanket. Chapter 4186. Yiqing Luo stretched out her hand. Chi-Chi's head was placed in her palm. Roar, roar. Chi-Chi whimpered softly, as though it was acting coquettishly. Yiqing Luo carried the little one in her arms as her slender fingers caressed its little head. How is it? Did you discover anything? Chi-Chi squinted its tiger eyes with a comfortable and joyful expression, as its soft voice sounded like a child. Chi-Chi listened to Master's arrangements and went over to Wu Fu Er's side. It raised its neck and spread its limbs wide, revealing its white belly. Just as Master had guessed, Hall leader Wu Yin bribed the female disciple on guard and secretly went to the dungeon to see Wu Fu Er. Yiqing Luo caressed Chi-Chi's soft belly as her eyes narrowed. She specially asked Chi-Chi to keep an eye on Wu Fu Er secretly. It was to find out who was the person behind Wu Fu Er. Everything was as she had guessed. Hall Master Wu Yin should have led Wu Fu heir to seek refuge with other forces against the imperial palace and against her. For now, Yi Qing Luo's mind was only filled with the 3 words secluded palace. After all, if it was other forces, even if they had any opinions about her, in front of Dmo Xian, they wouldn't dare to be so unbridled. Did you hear what they said? Yi Qing Luo asked. Chi flipped over again. Hall Master Wu Yin said, secluded palace will definitely save Wu Fu heir and leave Linglong Palace. He also said that they have already sent news and can take action immediately. It was indeed the secluded palace. It was really a force that refused to leave. Why was it always on her? And this action, what action was it referring to? Secluded palace. They had failed several times, and their losses were considered heavy. Now, they were going to take action again. What new tricks did they come up with this time? Or, what trump card did they have for sure? Yi Qing Luo subconsciously thought of herself, the one who had lost her profound energy. Could it be that the collaboration with Old Man Song to deal with Wu Fu heir had not fooled the other party? Yi Qing Luo decided to inform Dmo Xian about this matter first. Yi Qing Luo felt that with Dmo Xian by her side, anything could be easily solved. During this period of time, when he lost his power, she would just rely on her man. She tapped Chi-Chi's head lightly. Go and see what Xian is doing. If he's free, ask him to come over. Chi-Chi rubbed against her palm for a long time before she jumped down from the bed with her tail raised and jumped out of the window. Chi-Chi's shadow disappeared from the room. A clear and majestic voice came from outside the door. Madam D. Yi Qing Luo propped herself up as her gaze swept towards the room door, responding softly. Patriarch Xiao. Is anything the matter? Patriarch Xiao paused at the door. The Overlord asked me to invite you to the front hall. Yi Qing Luo frowned slightly. Xian, what did she want me to do in the front room? It seems that because of the mysterious lady of Yama's matter, Hall Master Wu Yin incited many female disciples of the Linglong Palace in an attempt to avenge the Linglong Palace master. Patriarch Xiao's tone was a little helpless. Those female disciples have been incited to the point that they have lost their minds. They don't care about the Overlord's existence at all. When Yi Qing Luo heard that, her expression changed slightly. How does Xian intend to handle this? Chapter 4187. This time it was noisy. It was probably not just Hall leader Wu Yan's instigation, not to mention the various superpowers that were eyeing them covetously from behind. Everyone wanted to share the burden of the Linglong Palace. After all, an existence like the D-Zune would never stay in the land for too long. Hence, it was impossible for him to be interested in the Linglong Palace. Thus, the Linglong Palace would eventually fall into the hands of the various major powers of the Earth Realm. During this period of time, if it wasn't for Dmo Xian suppression, the Earth Domain had probably already forgotten about the incident where they were nearly wiped out by the gloomy palace during the auction of the Earth Domain. Now, was he finally unable to restrain himself? The Overlord only asked me to invite Madame D over. As for the specific solution, I guess we'll have to wait for Madame D to arrive and discuss it with her. Patriarch Xiao said. Did he need to invite her to discuss it? Yi Qing Luo pursed her pink lips slightly as her gaze was fixed on the door as she called out. Then will family Patriarch Xiao please wait for me outside for a moment? I'll pack up and come out. Yes. Patriarch Xiao's expression didn't change much. Hearing this reply, Yi Qing Luo's eyes suddenly darkened. His movement of getting up also gradually slowed down. She leaned against the soft pillow, her fingers subconsciously caressing the profound phoenix ring. However, now that he had lost his dark force, he couldn't activate the connection between the Netherworld Phoenix ring and the Netherworld Dragon ring. She pursed her lips and looked at the door again. Old Man Song. She concentrated and shouted in her heart. Old Man Song's voice sounded in his mind. What's wrong? Something has happened. Her expression was grave. Have you sensed Beiyuan and Langley Xian's auras? Generally speaking, if Dmo Xian was not in the courtyard, he would definitely leave Tang Beiyuan and Langley Xian in the courtyard. However, ever since Patriarch Xiao appeared, he had not heard of the two men. Old Man Song's spiritual body immediately floated out and circled around the room. No. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to have sensed something, and his expression immediately changed. Not good. I can sense two very weak auras outside the courtyard. They seem to be the auras of those two guards. Weak? Beiyuan and Langley Xian had already been restrained. This was bad. Girl outside the door. Old Man Song sensed the person outside through the door. Go and find Venerable Sovereign. Chi-Chi is already gone. Yi-Ching Luo's expression congealed. We can only temporarily hold up the people outside the door. Wait for Xian to rush over first. He could only hope. When Chi-Chi rushed over to look for Xian, he was not busy. Otherwise, Chi-Chi would obediently wait for Mo Xian to finish his work before passing on the message. Madam, are you not ready yet? Outside the door, Patriarch Qiao's voice suddenly sounded again. There was a different emotion in his tone. Yi-Ching Luo's eyes flickered slightly as she took a look at Old Man Song and whispered, I'll have to trouble Patriarch Qiao to wait a little longer. I don't know where Xian has thrown my outer robe. Outside the door, there were several breaths of silence. Then, the door was pushed open. Madam D, let me help you look for him. There's a difference between men and women. After all, Lord Qiao is my friend Qiao Yinyan's father. It's not right for him to enter my room alone. Yi-Ching Luo hurriedly stopped him. However, Patriarch Qiao's footsteps did not stop there. After pushing the door open, he directly walked in. At the same time, Old Man Song's figure speedily returned into the azure dew bracelet.